Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Monday, October 7th, 2024. This is a regular meeting of the Minnetonka City Council. I will call this meeting to order and ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Jansen. Larson. Doggone, I knew I got that. It's no longer Ms. England. Ms. Larson. I apologize. I forgot to write that down. Would you please call roll? And you can call me whatever you want.
Foster Bolton.
Here.
Shack.
Here.
Wilburn.
Here.
Calvert.
Here.
Rameli.
Here.
Coakley.
Here.
Wearsome.
Here. Next item is approval of the agenda, and it appears we have an addenda. Mr. Funk.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Do have an addenda for your consideration this evening, and as related to item 9A, which is council chambers lighting and control replacement project. Staff is recommending that this item be removed from the agenda, and we'll bring this back at a future date with additional information. I just had a number of questions from various council members today, and there's no timing related to this project, so staff would just like a few extra weeks to pull together additional information, then we'll bring it back to you at a later date.
Great.
So with that, I turn back to you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Council, is there a motion? Councilmember Rameli.
I'll make a motion to adopt the addendum.
And the agenda.
And the agenda.
Thank you. And a second? Councilmember Calvert.
I'll second. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Rameli and a second by Councilmember Calvert. Ms. Larson, would you please call roll?
Foster Bolton.
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wilburn.
Yes.
Calvert.
Yes.
Rameli.
Yes.
Coakley.
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. Next item is approval of minutes, and we have the September 23rd, 2024 regular meeting minutes. Councilmember Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make the motion to approve the September 23rd, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
Thank you. And is there a second? Councilmember Foster Bolton.
I'll second.
All right. I've got a motion by Councilmember Calvert and a second by Councilmember Foster Bolton. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton.
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wilburn.
Yes.
Calvert.
Yes.
Rameli.
Yes.
Coakley.
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is special matters, and we have a guest tonight from Xcel Energy to give us a report on the activities of Xcel Energy in the city of Minnetonka. So, Ms. Swanson, please join us. Welcome.
Thank you.
They can make that podium go down a little lower if that's better too, I think.
Down.
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
I can see you now.
All right, great. Thank you. You can hear me now as
We
well?
can. We
All
can.
right, great. Well, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As the Mayor mentioned, I was invited to come here tonight to talk a little bit about who I am, how I work with the city, and to talk about things that are going on in the city of Minnetonka. And I'm going to kind of focus on things that have to do with reliability for the community and our customers. But first, I want to talk a little bit about my role with the company. I am a community relations manager. That is my title. We have 9 community relations managers in Minnesota. We each have our own geographic service territory. So I cover the Southwest Metro, and that Southwest Metro goes all the way west to Hamburg, south to Jordan, north to Robbinsdale, and east to St. Louis Park. So there's a lot of different sizes of towns and cities and a lot of different cultures in the area that I cover. So the primary purpose of a community relations manager is to work with local governments and community leaders on issues ranging from negotiating franchise agreements, facilitating permit approvals for generation, transmission, or distribution projects, and resolving customer issues. Those are just a few of the types of things that we might work on. So we like to advocate for positive outcomes that work well for both our cities and Xcel Energy. We know at times we are in disagreement with some things between the city and Xcel, but one of the roles, again, the responsibilities that I have is to see if we can come to an agreeable solution, because at the end of the day, We're going to be we're your we're your electric provider, and we want to have a good relationship with the city going forward. So I've worked with city staff on a number of different issues. When the customer calls the city on an Xcel Energy issue, rather than calling our customer service line, the city tends to contact me. Those issues might range from frequent outage complaints to damaging property during our restoration activities, tree trimming, graffiti on our equipment in the community, complaints on transformer locations, and so on. So I work with the city staff to resolve these issues, and most of the time I personally follow up with the customer in terms of what the resolution will be. I also want to mention that community relations managers have small budgets, which we use to sponsor events, activities, organizations that are important to our communities. For example, I sponsored the Klondike Dog Derby around Lake Minnetonka in the past. Other types of events that we've sponsored in the Southwest Metro could be things like concerts in the parks, Date of the City addresses, city festivals, etc. And we're also a resource responding to requests from cities regarding having Xcel Energy present at vehicle fairs, city open houses, home improvement, and safety fairs. So if there's any interest in terms of sponsorships, donations, or Xcel coming to one of those types of events that I spoke about, to please contact me. Moving on to what we have going on in the city, we have a number of projects underway in Minnetonka. We've just completed a transmission rebuild in the city, and a second one is currently in the permitting process that will also impact the city. These rebuilds will improve reliability as the old structures and old wire are being replaced by new equipment. There's many other actions underway in the city to improve the reliability of our system. We're installing numerous devices on our system across our communities, including the city of Minnetonka, which will improve reliability. We have installed and will be installed what's called Trip Saver devices, which will automatically restore momentary outages within a few seconds instead of waiting for someone to arrive and assess. So that is a situation where maybe a light tree branch is touching the line. This device will allow it to only have a momentary outage and not a sustained outage. But if, for example, it's a tree that's actually laying on a line, that will still require a crew to come and assess the corrections. Another type of device we're installing is called FLISR, which stands for Fault Location Isolation Service Restoration. So in short, it reduces the initial number of impacted customers to a fraction of a historical outage and results in faster restoration to the remaining affected customers. And it does this all automatically by the following. First of all, the device identifies the area where the issue is that caused the outage. So that's the fault location, or the FL, in FLISR. It isolates the area in question, which is the I in FLISR, and then it restores the customers that are not in the affected area, and that's the service restoration part of FLISR. So all of these devices that I've just talked about will not only limit the number of customers impacted by sustained outages, but will also result in avoiding sustained outages. So we continue to upgrade our infrastructure in other ways annually, such as replacing power poles, replacing underground cable, refurbishing our distribution feeders, and upgrading our substations. Other actions we're taking that will increase reliability to our customers includes plans to do some targeted undergrounding of overhead lines in Minnetonka starting in 2025. And tree trimming is currently underway in the city, and about 47 miles of tree trimming is expected to be completed in 2025. So this is all I had planned to share for the evening. I hope this information was helpful in terms of understanding my role at Xcel, how I work with the city, and give you a little bit of information in terms of the ongoing work we have in the city to make sure our customers and our communities have reliable power.
Well, thank you, Ms. Swanson. If it's okay, I'm going to ask my fellow council members if they have any questions for you, and if they don't, I may be able to come up with one
Okay.
or two. But
Sure.
Anyway, council members, any questions regarding Xcel Energy? Councilmember Foster Bolton.
So, because I've been getting a lot of calls. I mean, obviously been a stormy summer, and I know it's just going to get worse. but all of the calls have been about their frustration with the customer service at Excel.
Okay.
So they're just like, they're sort of at the end of their rope. And it's not just, it's like a few, just in my ward alone. So I just wonder how we can, because I'm not sure that's appropriate for my role to be sort of a customer service center for
Right.
you. So, and I didn't get your name.
Michelle Swanson. Maybe I didn't say it either, so that might be
I
my
probably-
issue. What I would say to that is that, ideally, we want our customers to call the customer service number, because by doing that, it tracks a process. I mean, we can tell when the call came in, we can tell who got it, we can document the process as it moves through in terms of people being frustrated. But are they frustrated because the duration or the frequency, or maybe it doesn't matter? But I would recommend, I know that I've worked on some frequent outage complaints that were sent to some of you city council members. They were forwarded to me by the city. And I kind of just worked directly with the people who would get involved if they would have called the 800 number to expedite and address their concern for outages. But again, I would be very interested in hearing what specifically the frustration was with our customer service area, so I can take that back to our company.
Well, I can remember they were not getting anywhere. They were on the line for a long, long
Okay,
time,
okay.
and then not, just not getting any response. And, kept trying. And again, that's the thing, is that it was just like, people were like, I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to call you. And, and one of them she was an older woman, so she, her son had to come, and then her daughter came, and it was, she just wasn't having any luck.
Okay. I can take that back. And there are different ways. You don't have to call customer service. If it's reporting an outage, you don't have to call customer service. You can do that by text. Maybe that's not well known. That might be another option. And I can certainly provide additional information on how to report outages to city staff. And maybe that is something you'd want to put on your website, for example. But I don't know if those customers were calling at the time where we had a couple 100,000 people out and it was just hard to get in. But I will certainly take that message back to our customer service area.
And then,
Anyone else? Oh,
sorry,
Go
exact,
ahead,
and
yeah.
there's certain areas in the city too that are affected more, it seems like. And I don't know, to be honest, but this is another call that I've gotten. Like, it was just like, our area seems to be affected more than, 2 blocks down. Like, every time there's a storm, if there's a strong wind, okay, thank you. So it's like, certain areas that,
Right, and I get that question a lot. Like, I will have a customer tell me that their power always goes out and their neighbors across the street, their lights are always on. And that could be due to several different things. First of all, they could be on different feeders, and one feeder was impacted and the other was not. Vegetation has a lot to do with outages. It's our number one cause of outages. And it's certainly the number one, it is the number one cause of outages in the Metro West. So vegetation has a lot to do with that as well. But again, in working with city staff, we've gotten some of these complaints, and what we've ended up doing, we have our area engineering looking at a customer that's complaining of frequent outages, and they've been able to, they look at the reliability history and they say, hey, this is a good candidate for the trip saver that I just spoke about. Or maybe this needs to have targeted tree trimming outside of our normal tree trimming process. So, again, we can kind of, if we've got the address, we can look into that more fully and see if there's additional things that we can do.
Councilmember Shack?
Thank you, Mayor. Along those same lines, I've had several people particularly this summer, contact me and say, hey, we've submitted to Excel regarding some trees that look precarious in our area, and we feel like they could get ahead of this and prevent an outage. And we've submitted 3 times, we haven't heard back, or nothing has happened, or both. And and it feels inefficient because then what I do is I reach out to Mr. Funk reaches out to Mr. Manchester reaches out to somebody on his staff, and here we are, we've spent a couple hours on this to try to get ahead of it. And so is there a reason? Because it seems to me we wouldn't even have to be talking about some of these outages if we were getting response. I mean, nobody knows what's going on in their neighborhood better than the people that live there. I mean, I know that more than, my colleagues and I as city council members more than anybody else. And so there seems to be some efficiency into listening to those folks. And is there a staffing issue, or is it just, is there something we can do to help make this not such a, to be frank, waste of time to try to get this help?
Right, right. What I would say is we have a lot of people who call in and say, we think there's a tree that's going to cause an outage, et cetera, and I just think it takes time to kind of get through all of those. I know when I get a call like that, or if I get an email passed from the city, the first thing I do is to contact my veg management people and say, can we check this out? And again, we have a lot of them, and then we also kind of look at when is the last time we trimmed in this area and kind of balance. If we haven't been there for a while, maybe that starts to go up a little bit, but I would say it's just the numbers in terms of just how many of these we need to check out, quite frankly. And we want to keep people trimming the trees and not divert them. So we've got a couple of people who will go out and assess when we get these kind of complaints. But, unfortunately, I think that's probably the reason why it's been taking so long.
I guess my follow-up to that, to be blunt, would be, it sounds like there's not enough resources. If you could pass along to the people who make those decisions, maybe there's not enough resources to manage that. And I empathize with the job that you have, and I don't mean to be so blunt, but if response isn't happening, then maybe there's not enough people to do the work.
I will take that back. That's fair criticism.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilburn.
So I do have a question, but this just occurred to me from this discussion. Could there perhaps be a system where that allowed people to submit photos so that your people could look and see what people are talking about and sort of assess the severity?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I think when people call into our customer service line, they're just saying, hey, there's a tree on 8th Avenue, et cetera. And I don't know, and I think you can also report these issues via email, but I'm not certain that you can upload an attachment. So I don't know the answer to that question, but that's a really good idea. And I will take that back, but that's a really good idea.
Okay. And my question is, so I just today saw a Facebook post, and it wasn't someone in Minnetonka, but someone that was expressing frustration that Xcel had come out and trimmed some trees and damaged their property in the process, and them and their neighbor, and Xcel was refusing to take responsibility. And again, I know it's a Facebook post. We don't know the how truthful that was, but I'm just wondering what the procedure is if someone calls you and says, hey, you've caused damage, what happens after that?
Well, if someone does that, then we'll go back to the tree trimming crew, or maybe it was a crew that wasn't doing tree trimming. Maybe it was they were addressing some outage and they caused ruts in the yard, et cetera. So we would go back to our departments who are involved and basically investigate where we're there, what did we do, what was the damage, and then make plans to restore that. In more, I guess, severe cases, people could actually file a claim, but typically people don't need to do that. Going through kind of our investigation process should be adequate.
Other questions? Councilmember Calvert and Councilmember Rameli next.
This might be a little bit, this is sort of in a totally different vein, But since I was on the Planning Commission, which is quite some time now, almost 8 years, there was, we've been very proud of our adoption of solar gardens. And we were, fully subscribed 100% solar. And it's been in many national news stories, and Minnesota is no exception, that electric companies are kind of seem to be slow walking the actual construction. And, even in the case of Minnetonka, our solar gardens, to my knowledge, are not fully built out yet. And so I was just wondering, when we go and we talk to our constituents and we're telling them, it's an investment, but we're going to save because we're going to save this much electricity and it's good for the environment. But and we're telling people in meetings that we're fully subscribed, and the solar gardens haven't been built out. It's a very uncomfortable feeling as a city council member. So I was wondering if you had any information about the speed at which these solar gardens are being built so that we truly can be fully subscribed, and that other cities that are trying to do the right thing for the environment will as well.
Are these new community solar gardens that you're referring to?
I'm sorry?
Are these new community solar gardens that you're referring to?
No.
They're
No.
existing
We're-
solar gardens?
Yeah, I mean, we signed a contract, but the solar gardens are still apparently in the process of being built. So we subscribed, and we're not
Okay.
getting the power, and Xcel, is raising rates on the city, but, they're also not giving us the things that, we have a subscription for.
Right. I can't answer that. I mean, I think it would be useful if maybe I can talk to city staff in terms of what solar gardens they are, their names, and I can do some internal review and then get back to city staff on that. But I do not know the answer to that.
I mean, it's a huge priority for several of us up here, because the environment is hugely important to us. And, I don't like being made to be inadvertently untruthful to my constituents when I'm bragging about how great our city is, because we've done the right thing and fully subscribed, and we're not in control on the other end.
Okay.
And that's really Xcel's job to get that done for us.
Councilmember Rameli.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Following up on that, first of all, thank you for your work. I appreciate your work in our community and the sponsorships and things like that. It's really important. We obviously want to be, good partners with Xcel and other power providers. Having said that, to follow up on Councilmember Calvert's comments, I'd like to swing back around to express a comment regarding Xcel's request that was approved by the Public Utilities Commission, which essentially punished Minnetonka and cities like us who were early adopters of community solar, by raising rates, by essentially reneging on your contract with us, which is costing Minnetonka to the tune of $100,000 a year that we had, done long-term planning around. And other communities are even worse. But we were, the reason that Minnetonka and this region, Minnesota, is the largest community solar system in the country. And early adopters like Minnetonka are part of the reason for that. And now to have us being, basically from my seat, Xcel reneged on your word. And so we're having to pay the price for that. So not only are we, I'm not sure, I don't know the issue about subscription to community solar gardens, but I'm really disappointed in that. And, it kind of makes me wonder, because I'm all the time saying, sign up for Solar Connect. Before this, I've been on WindSource since 2007. And I am constantly, anybody who knows me, any public meeting, I will stand up and say that. And now I have to wonder how trustworthy, am I doing the right thing? Because if they're doing that to us as a city, as a company, I do have to wonder, especially in an era when I know that wind and solar are now less expensive than fossil fuel. So I guess that's my comment. I know, again, that this isn't something that you personally can do, but I'm hoping by bringing this out in a public forum that we can bring this to the attention of others at Xcel who can perhaps answer these questions as to why this is necessary and why they, essentially reneged on their contract and their word. Thank you.
Well, I'll just make a comment that is still a legal proceeding, right? It's still going on. I believe it's going to the Court of Appeals, and I am not a legal person to comment. The PUC approved this, believing that the main reason is that non-subscribers were starting to pay a lot of money for people who are actually subscribing. And that was the main reason, I think, why the PUC determined that you've got low-income people, you've got non-subscribers that are essentially subsidizing that program. Again, I understand the city's position. I can't say anything to change your mind, and I don't want to change your mind. I just wanted to recap in terms of that was the main reason why the pricing got changed, because non-subscribers were starting to pay, $6, $7, $8 a month, and the PUC believed that was starting to get in the range that was too large. But again, it's a legal proceeding, and I probably can't say anything beyond that, because I don't know anything beyond that.
I'd just like to respond and follow up on that. I appreciate that. At the other hand, that's Xcel's choice to make those rate increases and put that on the back of lower income people. Again, in a time when green energy is less expensive than fossil. So that doesn't really fly with me.
Okay.
I'll say that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fair enough. Anyone else? Perhaps, Ms. Swanson, a little bit more than you bargained for tonight, but I wanted to, it comes
good feedback. It's
it
good
comes with the
feedback.
territory, and I know that, you're not unlike a council member in that we're in the customer service
Right.
business, and when our customers call, we have to respond, and you're hearing part of that. And I had a couple of things that I wanted to raise too. You laid out some significant transmission changes that are occurring in Minnetonka. And it's the classic thing, and the city faces it too. But we get questions from our constituents, and we call city staff, and those questions come from all over. And and as the city manager told me, we get about 300 plus permits per year for construction projects in public right-of-way. I think that number is about right. And so for staff to inform council about every little project that affects a roadway or, that's an inappropriate and inordinate burden. At the same time, is there a good way to dimensionalize these things? For example, the transmission lines along Highway 101. I received numerous questions, what's going on? And I like to be able to say, I know what's going on. I think I know what's going on, but I don't really know. So I just like to, if there are major projects, if we could coordinate communication so that we can be a bit more proactive with our residents, I think we would all benefit from that because there have been some large projects, and one was totally unrelated to Xcel, but there was a lot of work being done on fiber optic cable this summer that affected a lot of right-of-way in a lot of neighborhoods. And you get those questions, and well, what's happening and who's doing it, and we don't have the answers. That's really frustrating. So again, that one has nothing to do with Xcel, but it's an example of if there are big projects affecting a lot of people, if there could be some more proactive communication from the providers to the city so that we can, and then we'll trust our communication staff to assess, okay, is this something that we have to inform people broadly of? I think that would be helpful as a customer service provider, essentially. That would be helpful to me, and I think would be helpful to the rest of my council members as well. So just a thought, suggestion, and as you go forward, maybe there's some ways that we can dimensionalize those projects and share information.
Yeah, and just as an example, the last transmission rebuild project, we had a fact sheet. And maybe, coordinating with the city, that fact sheet should go on your website, or maybe that information is communicated in other ways at the city's communications department. But we do have a fact sheet for the rebuild project that just got done.
Good.
And we'll have a one-page fact sheet for the upcoming project, for the transmission
Good.
project
We
as
like
well.
one-pagers.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thanks. That's all we had. Thank you very much for being here today, and I appreciate that. The question on the solar gardens, you and I have had fairly lengthy conversations on that separately, and I appreciate your willing to listen to us and provide feedback.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice evening.
All right. That was special matters. Item 7 is reports from city manager and council members. So, Mr. Funk.
Let me turn my mic on. Excuse me. Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Got a couple things to report on here this evening. One, just want to give a shout out to not only our natural resources staff, but also our friends in Minnetonka Parks. There's a lot of activity going on in the month of October, so plenty of park work to be done. There is focus in the upcoming weekends on Big Willow, Meadow Park, Shady Oak, Gilliam's Field Park, Boulder Creek Park. So again, a huge shout out to the volunteers and to all those that love our parks and love our park system. It's a great relationship we have with the Friends of Minnetonka Parks. And so if there are volunteers or residents interested in working on any of those parks, look to our website and come and look at removing some buckthorn yet this fall. Our next meeting is not till later in October, but I do want to mention the Burwell Spooktacular is coming up. That is on Friday, October 25th from 5 to 7:30 at the Burwell House grounds. That address is 13209 East McGinty Road. Free parking is available at St. David's Family Center, also on Plymouth Road. And many of you know it's a great event, and our recreation staff does a great job facilitating games and crafts and performances. We do have the fire department there with our inflatable slide. So lots of activity coming up, and invite all of our families and friends here in Minnetonka to join us here in a couple weeks. Also want to make note that our Multicultural Advisory Committee is being formed, and applications are now being accepted. So anyone that's interested can go to our city's website and sign up. The Multicultural Advisory Committee is something that Chief Boardman has recently talked about, which will be an engaged group of Minnetonka residents and community organizers who meet monthly with the Minnetonka Police Department and our personnel to discuss topics that are important to our community and to the department. The goal of this committee is to work with, again, the police department to strengthen police-community relations in an effort to better and understand our diverse community needs. It's really a component of the Joint Community Police Partnership. So it's a new form partnership, and we're excited to get that off the ground. Next, I want to talk a little bit about, again, a word that we often use around here at the city is our commitment to excellence. And often you hear me report on different staff accomplishments. I do want to give a shout out to our GIS staff that works in our Public Works Department. They did a recent presentation at the state GIS LIS conference about how we, the city, built our city hydrant maintenance program. As you know, Council, we've done a number of dashboards in the last couple of years regarding our transparency, everything from housing to policing, and yes, even our hydrant maintenance program. So it's gotten some good attention, and a thanks to our staff for their efforts, and got recognized for a presentation that they gave to a lot of utilities across the state. Also want to mention then, we do have a Braver Angels workshop coming up, and that is Depolarizing Within. That is this week, Wednesday, October 13th at 1 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. at the Minnetonka Community Center. With that, this is a free presentation, so anyone can come and learn about how we all can be more aware of our interpolarization. And so join our Braver Angels team, who is a national organization looking to foster more productive political conversations as we enter that political season. So I think some of our council members have been in Braver Angel training. It's a great training. We've done some of that coming up also with staff, and so would encourage anyone in the community to attend. Also, another workshop is Managing Buckthorn. So I just mentioned upcoming volunteer work in our parks. We do have a Managing Buckthorn workshop coming up, so thanks to our natural resources staff again. That is on October 9th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. here at the Minnetonka Community Center. Staff will be sharing tips that will save homeowners time and money as they tackle that invasive plant on their property. If people do sign up, there will be online learning materials provided before that in-person session. And then last, one of our exciting events of the year is the Fire Department Open House. That is tomorrow night, October 8th, from 5 to 8 p.m. So certainly members of the community can join our fire department at this open house. This is an annual event. We get lots of folks, usually a couple thousand every year, come, and it's interacting with our police department and our fire department staff. There's Ride a Fire Truck. That's always a big hit with the younger kids. We have hot dogs, as I mentioned. People can also register to vote. There are native plant seed packets. There's inflatable sides, cocoa, all sorts of fun events, so activities. So encourage anyone from the community to come out and join us. It should be a nice evening for it. And with that, Council, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. Council members, what do you have to report tonight? Councilmember Foster Bolton.
Well, I just, to add to Mr. Funk's comment about buckthorn removal, I went on a volunteer thing on Saturday morning with Friends of the Minnetonka Park, and I had never done that before. I had pulled garlic mustard, which is just pulling, and it's an interesting, at least for me, when I went, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like so daunting. It was so much stuff, but by the end, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, it looks like you clean house, you know, when you spring cleaning or something. It was just very cool. So, and I mean, I learned a lot about buckthorn and, you know, kind of the differences of what to chop. I mean, I would just get rid of everything if it were me, but, so it was a good lesson, you know. I'd just be like, because it's not easy. That stuff does not want to come up. But they were so good, and actually, the Friends of the Minnetonka Park they did a great job of saying, you know, we work with the city, and like just kind of like, it just felt like such a partnership, you know, and so easy to sign all the waivers and stuff. I brought a friend, and it took 5 minutes, and we were out doing our thing, so it was great.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wilburn.
So continuing the buckthorn conversation, I'm going to be removing buckthorn with the Friends tomorrow at Evergreen, Victoria Evergreen. For some reason, it didn't make it on the city website sign up, so it's tomorrow at 4. Come on out and pull some buckthorn. It's become kind of my tradition. Ever since I was elected, I've gone to that park and pulled buckthorn with the Friends. So. It's a lot of fun, and it's amazing the amount, as Councilmember Foster Bolton was saying, the amount that can be cleared in just a couple of hours is really amazing to see.
Thank you. Councilmember Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. So first of all, I'd like to wish happy 83rd birthday to my dad. It's his 83rd birthday, and it was super fun because I moved him here about a year ago with my mom, and we got to celebrate together, which was great. And I also want to wish Shana Tova, or Good New Year, to those who celebrate Rosh Hashanah, and that means Good New Year. And there are many Jewish people right now that it's already not a good New Year, so we just say a better New Year. And I want to extend my thanks to the Minnetonka Police, who have been supporting the Jewish community during high holy days and other times. It shouldn't be necessary to have police protection just to worship, but we do. And it's a stain on our society that it is necessary. A man was arrested at Temple Israel who had a gun, and he had been calling in terroristic threats for some time. And former Councilmember Sheppy's son had his bar mitzvah there just within days of that incident. And it's just no laughing matter what is going on in our country. The Jewish population is 2.4% of the U.S. population. and they are the victims of 68% of all religious-based hate crimes. So it's not a great time. So I say this because this is supposed to be a joyous and reflective time for the Jewish community. Today is a time of terrible mourning. It marks a terrible event, the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust a year ago today. And it precipitated untold suffering on the entire region in the Middle East. And so one of the things that Jews do at this time of year is we pray for peace. That is what I was doing in my services this week. And the other thing that we do, this is a time of reflection, and we try to start the new year with a clean slate and make amends for all of our shortcomings to the people that we have fallen short. So falling short with constituents, city staff, our friends, our family, my elected and appointed colleagues. So I ask forgiveness for any of the shortcomings that I have so that we can all start our year with a clean slate. But I also ask my neighbors to help us resist the rise of bigotry and hate in our country, which just with the Jewish community has caused 100,000 incidents of harassment, threats, intimidation, assault, and other violence to the Jewish community in our country in the last year. So today I speak for my community within our community, and I also want to thank the Minnetonka Police and I'm sure our cooperating police agencies for responding to a little scare at Minnetonka High School. Recently, it turned out to be nothing, but we had a large police presence there, and it just showed the importance of collaboration between the schools and our first responders and law enforcement, and the importance of planning to prevent tragedies at our schools. So I just want to commend our police department for being such consummate professionals and keeping our children safe, because children are our future and they deserve to go to school fear-free. I just think it's a wonderful thing that we were able to deploy people in such an organized and useful fashion without anything negative happening that day. That was lucky and just a good drill. Thank goodness it was just a drill. So with that, I just want to say happy New Year to all those who celebrate. And even if you don't, I have to say it's the one perk of being Jewish to get a second bite at the Happy New Year apple.
Thank you, Councilmember Calvert and Councilmember Shack. And sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I too wanted to express to Councilmember Calvert and the rest of the folks in the community Shana Tova, and or as Councilmember Calvert told me via text, maybe just a better year. There's a lot of suffering in the world and a lot of hate, and I know that weighs heavy on all of us, and we're with you in spirit and can appreciate the sentiment. Also, to folks, Yom Kippur is on Saturday, and may everyone have an easy fast. So thank you for your words, Councilmember Calvert. They're very meaningful. I'll also say that I started work very early this morning, which gave me time to go for a run and enjoy the beautiful day. And there are big stacks of buckthorn in Big Willow Park, and it is very impressive. And not only are the friends and staff who help do the cutting and treating of those areas appreciated, but the public works folks who will come and remove the stacks of buckthorn later in the upcoming weeks are really appreciated as well. It makes such a difference in the beauty of the park to have all that weedy green gone. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shack. Councilmember Romali. You've waited long enough.
Thank you, Mayor. Echo the words of my colleagues on Happy Jewish New Year, and Happy New Year to all who are celebrating, and even those of us who aren't. I always take it to heart as a way to, as a time to make amends as well, and to ask forgiveness from those around me. So I appreciate that tradition very much, and like to have adopted it as one of my own. On another lighter note, I would like to do a little bit of show and tell. This is a lovely birdhouse that I purchased at the Landings Senior Craft and Artisan Fair several weeks ago. It was on Saturday. However, and it's beautiful. It's a little bluebird house. And it was, and I love a bargain, $12. So I just wanted to say that anybody can go to the Landing year-round. You don't have to wait for next year's craft fair. You know, it's a beautiful building, kind of by Trader Joe's, the Old Dick's. You know, up near Hopkins Crossroad. There's a beautiful trail. You know, outlook over a pond there. But I got, you know, this and several other gifts that I've already given away, including a beautiful bracelet for my mom who's going through chemotherapy right now, and it brought joy to her day. So I wanted to thank the seniors for that. I think it's really interesting. The artisans and craftspeople split their revenues with the city, and it's run by a board of volunteers. So it's all volunteer run. They split their revenues with the city to help with operations for the building. And I heard from multiple vendors there, the craftspeople, how much this means for them, that this is a really meaningful activity for them to both create the works that are sold, but also to be running this organization that is doing this. And in fact, city representatives from all around the region come because this is a rather unique offering that we provide to our senior residents, but all of our residents. And so, you know, kudos to the staff and the senior services staff who are helping run this, as well as, you know, to all of the vendors and the organization that keep it going. And I just encourage people to support it by going there and maybe doing some early Christmas shopping while it's so beautiful right now in the fall. On another note, the mayor and I attended the Sensible Land Use Coalition meeting a few weeks ago. It was an interesting discussion by State Representative Larry Kraft and Daniel Lightfoot of the League of Minnesota Cities, touching on issues regarding housing affordability in our region. And I think it's an important discussion. Look forward to learning more and continuing that discussion. Also, I forgot to wear my pin, but I wanted to thank staff, especially the election staff and our voting judges, our election judges. I voted early absentee just last week, and so as we all know, we can vote early absentee right now, either in person or by mail. Early direct voting, I believe, begins October 18th, so you're putting it right into the machine, just like you would on Election Day, and then, of course, those happen here at City Hall, and then Election Day will be at your polling place. So I'm hoping that our election staff or somebody from staff will talk about kind of our election system here. There's a lot of mis and disinformation out about right now about election security. And I just want to say that we obviously do have very secure elections in our country, and that begins right here at the local level. I'm really proud and, you know, just grateful for the work that our election staff does and our election judges. And, you know, I think we need to celebrate that and keep that in mind. And then just lastly, the Braver Angels event, the Depolarizing from Within or Within workshop is something that I attended at my first Braver Angels workshop several years ago. And it's just one of a number of fantastic events, workshops, discussions that they have. So really hope that folks in the community will take the time to attend that this Thursday, or next Thursday, the 13th. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Romali. Anyone else? Councilmember Coakley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, although I didn't attend our church service on Sunday, I did watch it last night online, and I got a chance to see the mayor attend Grace Apostolic Church, and then Chief Scott Borboom, and then also Jace. And I just want to say how proud I was to see our staff at our church. They were celebrating their 12th year anniversary in Minnetonka. And I was just so proud. And my sister, I was at a different church in Minneapolis with my daughter, and my sister was sending me text messages, and she was like, you should have been here. And it was just good to see last night. And I just want to tell them thank you for attending. And I'll let the mayor say what he needs to say. I'm sure he's going to talk about his role there. But I just wanted to say thank you for attending, and it just made me proud. And I just know that Bishop Johnson and the members at Grace Apostolic really appreciated to see staff there. So thank you. On a Sunday too. So
Very good. Are there any other council comments? I've got a few. And first of all, I just want to comment about the importance of this date. What happened in Israel a year ago today was such a horrible act of hatred and violence and terrorism. And a lot's happened since then, but my heart goes out to the nation of Israel and to everyone who has been touched by that horror of that event. And clearly there have been many horrors in the Middle East since that time. And I just want to say, one, that hate has no place in our city and our society, and I want to do everything in my power to ensure that we care about one another, that we're a welcoming city, and that we're a loving city, that we care about our fellow human beings. And so I will never forget October 7th. It's we have to remember the horror that occurred there, and demonstrate that we care by resolving personally that we will not lower ourselves to the level of hating in such a divided time, of demonstrating hate or inappropriate thoughts regarding somebody we disagree with. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing with me. I mean, as my wife will tell you, I am often wrong, and so I want our community to be a loving community and to be an accepting community. And it disturbs me when I did the arithmetic on the amount of violence and hatred that occurs toward Jewish people in our society. A Jewish person is 28 times more likely. That's my arithmetic. 68 divided by 2.4 comes out to 28 times more likely to experience a hateful, any form of hate or anti-Semitism, any form of bias than is any other member of our society. I mean, that's a sobering number. And we have a large Jewish population in our community, and I want every member of that, of the Jewish community in our city to feel welcome and to feel safe in our community. And I really appreciate the chief and the work that our police department has done to provide security at these synagogues. But it is disturbing to me that one segment of our society can be targeted to the degree they have been. So I just want to stand in solidarity with members of the Jewish community and tell all residents and all people who live in Minnetonka that we care for them and they're welcome here and we have their backs, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing there. The second thing I want to talk about is I had an opportunity to attend a Minnesota meeting today, and this was put on by the Minneapolis Chamber, and it was to talk about the importance of water in our state and in our identity and in our well-being. And I sat at the same table as the mayor of Woodbury, and they are struggling with PFAS in their water, as is much of the East Metro. And there's part of me that says, well, boy, I'm glad we don't have that problem here. And I'm glad we don't. But it's not Woodbury's problem. it's not the East Metro problem, it's our problem. And what can happen there can happen anywhere. And the meeting was talking specifically about what we can do in terms of keeping water safe. And it is a tremendous resource that we in the Midwest have, and we in particular in Minnesota have, the land of 10,000 plus lakes. We need to value our resources. And I want to just encourage everyone to do everything that we can to be mindful of that abundant but scarce resource that we have in Minnesota. So that was a very interesting and profitable meeting. A couple other things, and a lot of things got mentioned already tonight. I do want to thank the Friends of Minnetonka Parks for the great work that they do. And I will say that tomorrow I am walking with Mary Hamill through Meadow Park to show me all of the improvements that have been made there in terms of buckthorn removal, and she keeps me posted. We kind of take an annual walk. Now, I need to do better, be more like my fellow council members and not just walk and look at the good work being done, but put some gloves on to get out there and remove some buckthorn as well. But I am very appreciative of the work that people who care about our environment, who care about our parks, and the Friends of Lone Lake Park and the work that they do with staff is so valued and worthwhile. So I wanted to mention that, and I think that's enough from council members tonight. So we'll move on to the next item, but thank you for bearing with us. We had a lot to talk about tonight. So the next item is citizens wishing to discuss matters not on the agenda. And is there anyone here who would like to report something to the city council? This is an open mic opportunity, and if you have something you'd like to share, please come forward, state your name and address, and let us know. And we will follow up on that. We won't take action tonight. Is there anyone? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on. Next item is bids and purchases, and we only have one tonight. We had two, but now item 9A, formerly 9B, is bids for the water treatment plant, number 16, variable frequency drive replacement project. And Mr. Manchester, I believe that's you.
It is, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight are bids for the water treatment plant 16 VFD replacement project. The project proposes to replace electrical drives, switchboards, and a number of components related to the system for our pumping operations. On August 26, 2024, Council ordered the improvements, accepted the plans and specs, and authorized the ad for bids for the project. The proposed improvements specifically include replacing 2 electrical switchboards and variable frequency drives for 4 high service pumps, 3 backwash pumps, and 2 well pumps. It also includes a new SCADA control panel which controls and monitors our system as well, just to keep the operations going. Bids were opened electronically on September 26, 2024. We did receive 5 bids for the project. The low bidder, Premier Electric Corporation, has satisfactorily completed projects similar in Minnetonka. There is a range in the bids, like we see in a lot of projects. We do typically call the low bidder, and we did on this project as well, just to make sure their numbers are okay and they don't have any concerns before we bring that to you, which we did, and they were comfortable with their numbers as well, so I did want to mention that. If the recommended actions are approved by council, construction would be expected to start in the spring and be completed before the peak season. And so with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor. I'll keep it short with 3 recommendations: a motion to award the contract for the wastewater treatment plant number 16 VFD replacement project to Premier Electric Corporation in the amount of $459,600. A motion to authorize our Deputy Public Works Director to expend the allocated funds for the project costs without further council approval, provided the costs do not exceed the budget of $650,000. And then finally, a motion to amend the 2025 to 2029 CIP for the wastewater treatment 16 VFD replacement project number 25904 to authorize the Deputy Public Works Director to approve project-related work orders in 2024, primarily to get equipment ordered. So with that, I'll turn it back to the Mayor and Council for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manchester. Council, any questions for Mr. Manchester? An important project is... Oh, yes, Councilmember Foster Bolton.
Sorry, and I know you mentioned this, but and I talked to Mike a little bit about it, but really, it's so much lower than the next bid. I mean, and you know, when you do home projects, you always are told, don't accept the lowest bid because they're going to do shoddy work or whatever. And, I mean, I get it, we've done work with them before, but I mean, like, seriously, I was just like shocked. And what can, I mean, I know you said that you did the checks and stuff like that, but how do we know, really?
Yeah, good question. Councilmember Foster Bolton, Mayor and Council. There's a number of factors that go into bids, and so this time of year, other times of year, I mean, contractors, depending on the amount of work they have, they throw different numbers at projects. Since we have worked with them often in the past, we don't have concerns. They did confirm that everything was in their bid, and we certainly hold them to that. That's why we call them, and so, the loss would certainly be theirs at this point. But they were comfortable, so we don't have the concern, and so I don't think it'll be an issue. But we did talk to them.
Very good. Council, any other questions? Or a motion? Councilmember Wilburn.
I move approval of the recommended actions as read by Mr. Manchester.
Very good. That works for me. Is there a second, Councilmember Shack?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Wilburn and a second by Councilmember Shack. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack,
Yes.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romalee,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Wearsum.
Yes, motion carries. Let's see, next item is consent agenda, but I have to say something just before then because Councilmember Coakley did such a nice job of covering my attendance and the chief's attendance at Grace Apostolic Church yesterday. But I want to say that Grace Apostolic Church celebrated their 12th anniversary, and they're a church that's located on Lake Street Extension, just west of Shady Oak Road and just off of Highway 7. And the city and the police department in particular have a very positive and collaborative relationship with Bishop David Johnson. And we were invited to this celebration yesterday. And I just want to say that I was honored to be there. And they were wonderful hosts. And I just jumped over it and I forgot, so I apologize, and I wanted to comment on that. So I hope you'll forgive my breach of protocol and allow me now to say that we are on item 10A, and I'm confident the city attorney may mention to me something later, but we'll roll with that. We did not amend the agenda, so my apologies. But item 10A or 10 is the consent agenda items, and these are typically routine. It's my job to read them into the record, and then we will handle them all in one vote unless an item is pulled. And if someone from the audience or on the council wants to pull an item, we can do that. Otherwise, we will just move through this after it's been read into the record. So item 10A is a resolution appointing election judges and absentee ballot board for the November 5th, 2024 state general election. Councilor Calvert.
I don't want to pull it, but I do want to make a brief comment, and that is to thank the people that are acting as election judges and absentee ballot board. These are not easy times to be even volunteer elections officials, so thank you, thank you, thank you. In addition to the people that are in our parks doing that wonderful work, this is really the work of democracy, and I think it bears recognition. So, and I'm happy to make the motion appointing the election judges and absentee ballot board for the November 5th, 2024 state general election.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Calvert. And Councilor Romalee?
Yes, I'd like to actually pull this item and ask a few questions or a question of staff, if I may. And again, this is following up on my previous comments, also thanking election staff and volunteers. But yes, I would like to pull.
All right. And since we have no other items in item 10, Councilor Romalee, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to ask the staff, again, kind of following up on my earlier comments regarding kind of the election process and the security measures so that we can assure our residents that, this is a secure process on our end. And, I personally believe going up from there, but it starts here.
Mr. Funk?
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Rameli, and Council. I would defer to our Assistant City Manager, Miranda Dahman. Ms. Dahman does supervise our City Clerk's office, whose office is responsible for all of our election activity. Ms. Dahman is her area of expertise, and so I would ask Ms. Dahman to comment on just election security. Thank you.
Ms. Dahman?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Mailey. Kelsey Larson behind me is a senior election specialist, so I'll take a hit at it, and then she can obviously help too if there's more specific questions. She's more in the world than I am. But of course, election security has been a forefront topic of elections the last few years especially. I'm proud to say that Minnesota has consistently been a national leader in voter turnout, election reform, and ballot security. That's something that the state has taken very seriously and have done many measures historically and continue to do to make sure that our ballots are safe. So there are many measures in place to ensure a safe and secure election here in Minnesota. We do rely on paper ballots. It's a cornerstone of our elections. We're not on electronic voting. You get a paper ballot, you go through a process. Those paper ballots are couried to the county. And there's no handing, there's no going through different systems electronically. Everything is done through paper ballots. There's also, they're reviewed by the city, the county, and then ultimately those results go up to the state level. So there's lots of processes in place to ensure security along the way. Testing equipment. All of our equipment goes through numerous testing exercises. They're doing it this week, so Ms. Larson's been testing all the equipment this week. They also have a public accuracy test, which they do then test equipment, and the public is welcome to come and view those accuracy tests as well. Those are required, all of this is required by law to do, and making sure that the public is able to access those events and view the testing live with the staff and election judges. And then I would recommend anyone with questions or concerns to visit the Office of Secretary of State's website. They have a really great page that can more information can be found. I know they have staff who only focus on security, and they just have a really great FAQ on there that answer a lot of security questions. So if you have any more specific questions, I can help answer them, or Ms. Larson as well.
No, thank you, Ms. Dahman. I will share that link certainly in my communications with residents, and I thank you for sharing that and for the information kind of starting from the ground up here in Minnetonka. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on this item? I'll add a quick comment that I was at a meeting. Councilmember Wilburn, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to make a quick comment. Just that I had the opportunity to serve as an election judge last year outside of Minnetonka, but and to see how well the system works from that side. And again, we just echo everything in thanking our election judges and absentee ballot board, and also our staff that works diligently to make sure that we are holding free and fair elections.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilburn. And I wanted to thank our election staff and our team. And I had the opportunity to be in a meeting with Secretary of State Simon a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, he talked at length about election security. And I can say with confidence, we do elections well in Minnesota. And Minnetonka is at the top of the list in terms of how well we do elections. And I'm not just trying to be a homer here and vote for the home team. I mean, I really do believe that we do an outstanding job with elections, and we work hard to make sure that our elections are free and fair. And I absolutely believe that they are. So it's an important topic, and I think our Secretary of State is very diligent, and I think that the training that is provided to election officials is outstanding. And I'm just pleased that we do local elections. At the meeting I was at, a number of mayors said to me that, well, you know, we just let the county handle it for us. And you know, I'm somebody who has spent time at the Capitol talking about the importance of local control, and elections are so fundamental to democracy. Why would we want to give that up? So I'm proud of what we do. I think we do it right in Minnetonka, and I'm very proud of our election staff. So with that, would somebody like to make a motion? Councilmember Mailey, perhaps?
Thank you,
Not
Mayor.
to call on you, that's unfair.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's right, excuse me.
I'll second.
Thank you. I apologize. We're jumping ahead here. So a motion by Councilmember Calvert and a second by Councilmember O'Malley. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack,
Yes.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romaley,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Wearsum.
Yes, motion carries. That brings us to item 12, introduction of ordinances, and 12A is items relating to cannabis. Ms. Wishnak, lucky you.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This is a little bit complicated, but a lot of the abilities for cities to regulate in the cannabis world is controlled by the state. So you'll see some of that information in our presentation tonight. We're going to talk about the registration process at the city level for a retail business. Susan's going to jump in at some point and talk about zoning and what that means, where businesses can be located. And then finally, we'll end on cannabis use in public spaces, which is a little bit different than the first two subjects, but we thought we'll take care of it all at once. We've already introduced that ordinance, but it's been a while, so we'll have you look at it one more time, just to make sure we're on the same page. So and again, the title of what section we're dealing with is at the top. So this is the registration portion of the ordinance that's being presented to you. That would be enforced by the Community Development Department. All retail businesses must be registered, and the applications have to be submitted through the director. Registration would be issued if the business satisfies state law requirements and also complies with the zoning portion of the code. The police department would conduct annual compliance checks, and then those failures would go to community development, our department, and then that would be shared with the Office of Cannabis Management. So it's not unlike what we do for tobacco or alcohol compliance. It just would add another layer to what businesses would be checked. The Community Development Director may suspend or reinstate registration as provided by state law. Again, there's not a lot of room there for the city to regulate or suspend licenses, but there is a little bit. There are some of this on the left-hand side talks about discretionary components that the city can choose to do or not to do, and on the right side it indicates what the city, at least in the proposed ordinance, has done. So you are allowed to allow the county to do registration. In this case, we're choosing the city option as the registration authority. You can make it administrative or council approval or denial, whatever the case is. We have put in the ordinance that it's an administrative function, and there is a little discretion in approval or denial of the registration. Fees are just the maximum allowed under law. It's not revenue generating. There's a lot of costs that are involved not only in reviewing a registration, but also with compliance after the business is operating. There is new registration required with a new location, and then no notice is required if an immediate threat of health or safety occurs. For instance, if they're selling products that create a health issue, we can immediately require them to stop or suspend their operations. For other kinds of things, that would be effective after the Office of Cannabis Management completes its investigation. So there may be issues that aren't immediate but need to be figured out and investigated. We cannot, as a city, be lower than one store or retail location per 12,500 people. And so in that case, we would have 5. This does not include what we're terming, and this was, I'm going to call us the trio. So the city attorney, Susan as the assistant city planner, myself went through and tried to figure out some of these issues. We do have a lot of what I would call secondary retailers, and they're selling low potency hemp products. So the best one I can think of is the low potency gummies, right? You might have a business, it's a gas station, and they're selling gummies. That's not the primary use of the business. So we're calling them in the ordinance a secondary retailer. So that maximum of 5 is not for those secondary businesses, but 5 is for what we would call a primary cannabis business. And we haven't had discussions of having a municipal store, so we're not including that at this time. So there are location standards that are included. Right now, the way the ordinance is set up, registrations would be issued in the ordinance in the order they were received, except there would be preference given to the planned I-394 district. There's some talk in the staff report about why that is. Ridgedale being a regional center, we have a lot of business components in that area. There's a concentration of commercial uses. Generally, that area is further away from other households or single-family households rather than a neighborhood district, neighborhood area where you have a smaller commercial area. However, we do have language in there that if the council doesn't want to direct retailers to this area, that can certainly be removed from the ordinance. Again, remember I-394 district is pretty much end-to-end along 394. A lot of us think about it just as Ridgedale, but there's a lot of commercial property in the area that isn't in the Ridgedale proper area. Finally, this is about buffers, so I want to make clear about this. Retail locations would not be permitted within 1,000 feet of schools or within 500 feet of any attraction within a public park that is used by minors. Buffers would not be applied to daycares or other residential care facility. We were thinking through how this would work, and we could not imagine a time where we would know every daycare or every residential care facility in the city. The city doesn't regulate those uses, so there's not a process or a procedure for us to monitor those businesses. So it could be that all of a sudden you have a daycare pop up somewhere and then you didn't know about it, and now we have some kind of standard for buffering from those uses. And so who gets preference, you know, the business with the cannabis or the daycare. So I think we arrived at that fairly quickly after some initial analysis trying to figure out how to do that. And finally, buffers would not be for industrial type businesses. These are licensed by the state of Minnesota, but they wouldn't be registered by city. So i.e., think of manufacturing. So if you're manufacturing widgets, you're in an industrial park area. If you're manufacturing cannabis, you're manufacturing cannabis. We don't see it any different in the ordinance. The only thing that's different is that the state of Minnesota would then have a license for that activity. If you feel differently, so we put a note in the staff report, if you feel differently about these buffers and daycares and other facilities, we can talk about that. You can also talk about applying buffers to industrial properties as well. So I'm going to let Susan jump in here. She's going to talk about ordinances and the kind of that model ordinance that was put out for the city to have some guidance for this proposed ordinance.
Thanks, Julie. Mayor and council members, there are actually 13 different types of cannabis businesses that will be licensed by the state. And generally, all of those businesses could be accommodated in one or more of the zoning districts that we have in our community. But staff is proposing a few zoning language amendments to be more specific in our zoning ordinance, or just be more clear, quite frankly. So the first change is to our residential district. Under our current language, agricultural uses are allowed as a primary and permitted use within the R1 district, your single household residential district. And we're suggesting that the ordinance be amended to specifically prohibit commercial cultivation of cannabis as a permitted agricultural use in the residential district. Now, by state law, you can grow cannabis for your personal use on your personal property, but this language would prohibit someone from buying a lot in Minnetonka and using it for the commercial production of cannabis. The second change is that cannabis retail businesses, the registration ordinance that Julie was just talking about, retail businesses would be allowed as permitted uses in all of our existing commercial districts. So that would be the PID district, B2, B3, subject to the registration ordinance. In other words, in theory, retail businesses would be allowed in any commercial area. In practice, there would be 5 locations allowed in the city. The third change then is that within the industrial district, cannabis retail businesses would be allowed as accessory or conditional uses, depending on the size, the physical size of that retail business relative to the size of the building. Again, subject to the retail registration ordinance. And our current ordinance allows for retail in industrial districts in that same manner, accessory or conditional relative to the size of the business. And then the final change is simply allowing testing facilities as a permitted use within the industrial district, not calling out cannabis testing facilities, just adding that phrase, testing facilities, along with warehousing, storage, manufacturing, processing, and research uses that are already allowed in the district for items other than cannabis. Just want to emphasize again that unlike retail uses, these more industrial uses do not require registration under the ordinance, but do require licensing through the state. Just like all other uses in our industrial district, these, what we're calling more industrial cannabis uses, would be subject certainly to our nuisance ordinances and everything else that's already in the code.
So, if you have all that in your heads, now let's move to a different subject matter. It is the cannabis use in public places. So again, we already introduced this ordinance and talked to you about, I think we also had a study session about this, about where the use would be allowed. And just to be really in a summary form, cannabis use would not be allowed within 50 feet of a city-maintained athletic facility, park shelter, or other park building. Also, it would not be allowed within 50 feet of an outdoor entertainment facility when the facility is in use. I'm going to use amphitheater as an example of that. Also, you would not be able to use it on any part of the property with a city-operated building other than a typical park building, including the city campus buildings. So you would not be able to do it around the city campus. Just so you know, we just have a sidebar here talking about smoking and vaping. There's also no smoking and vaping 50 feet from a publicly operated transit station or within 25 feet of a bus stop, and again on any city park property, including trails within park property. Okay, I'll let that set in for a minute. When a location falls within the scope of not allowed in any manner and no smoking provisions, the most restrictive applies. So if you have kind of a situation where you have both issues going on, the more restrictive regulation applies. Also, use would not be regulated on trails outside of public parks or streets and privately owned property generally accessible to the public. So for instance, Bennett Park's a good example. We don't own Bennett Park. The city does not own that park. They would have to come up with their own use that they wanted to have within their park, but we would not control that as a city. Similarly, if you think about some of the larger trail systems that are not in a park, 101, Plymouth Road, again, we're not proposing regulating the use on those trails. If they're within a park, yes, that would be prohibited. So we do have a few things for you in terms of actions. Tonight is really about introducing the ordinances. A reminder for the council, typically what we want from you is a list of things either that you want changed or you want more information about, or things you just don't understand, or maybe we weren't as complete as we could have been in our staff report. So if we have at least some information and direction on that. Tonight's not the final night. Then secondly, you'd have to refer the zoning ordinance amendment to the Planning Commission. We forgot there's a small section that needs to go to Park Board too, so if you could just add that in when you're ready to make a motion, that a small portion would have to be reviewed by the Park Board. And then the last thing I'll say, just so you know, the information about the proposed ordinances is out on Minnetonka Matters. It has been pushed to the subscribers of that particular project page. So anybody watching cannabis over the last year will already got an email about these ordinances. People are allowed to comment on any parts of the ordinances for a period of about 2 weeks, because we do want to bring this back to you at the end of the month. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. We tried to make it as simple as possible. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you and for any questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Ms. Wishnak. Council, questions that come to mind, questions that, Ms. Wishnak perhaps can answer tonight, or that we want to forward to the Planning Commission for further, and staff for further consideration. Councilmember Shack.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll work backwards because I'm keeping this item. I should have taken notes, but I keep it in my head. So as it relates to the public use piece, and I think I've mentioned this before, perhaps I'm in the minority, but what I would really like to see is as much nexus with how we treat smoking and or alcohol use within public facilities, parks, amphitheater. I think the more nuanced regulation we have for each use, I think the more difficult it is to enforce and more confusing it is for residents. And so, my preference is to maybe see I don't know if there's a chart or something where it can kind of say, well, this is at the amphitheater during music in the park. Could you have a beer but not a THC drink? And so those types of things. And I know there's nuance there. Otherwise, I think that piece of it we've talked quite a bit about, and I disagree. I think I'm probably in the minority regarding the use, say, as a, if alcohol's being served, possibility of adding the use of THC or cannabis, but that's not a hill I'm going to die on. In regards to the zoning, I do think that pretty much makes sense. I think it does bring up conversations that we've had in the past about other uses again and geographical restrictions, but I think the cat's already out of the bag as it relates to these secondary retailers, so I'm very comfortable with the fact that that hasn't seemed to be a problem over the course of the past several years. That say, I was seeing, like I told Mike this morning, hair salons selling some kind of, whatever, just that they'll have to register, which makes sense. The one thing, this is probably not going to come as a shock, my heckles are up a little bit on the 394 district piece, so I'd like to hear what the Planning Commission thinks about that. I'm sensitive, particularly, there's neighbors in that area, people who live there who are very sensitive to kind of what's going on. If I think about 5 retailers, you got one at West Ridge, maybe you have one in the mall by Total Wine, you have one Ridge Haven, you have one inside Ridgedale, and it just seems like a lot of concentration, even if it's spread out across the zone. So I don't feel real comfortable with it, but I'm really going to rely on insight from the Planning Commission on that one. So those are kind of my questions slash thoughts, but the one thing I want to say is the meticulous nature of the staff report and the ordinance is really appreciated. I think it makes so much sense that we get this done right. And we're going to have to amend it, but knowing how difficult it is to make decisions on amending these things, I'm really glad we're doing it, trying to do it correctly up front, and I really appreciate the work that staff's put in on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Shack. Are there other comments or questions, comments? Councilmember Rameli? Oh, excuse me.
Mayor, Mayor and members of the council, I just wanted to clarify something. With respect to that PID provision, that would not go to the Planning Commission because it's not a zoning regulation. The buffers, the distance requirements, are not in the zoning ordinance. They're in the registration ordinance, which is not a zoning provision. We could perhaps ask the Planning Commission, but this isn't a zoning ordinance, and it's not going to follow that process. The registration won't. The other thing about that PID reference is just to clarify, that is really just about timing. It's about processing. We have a limit of 5 for the non-secondary retailers. No limit on the secondary retailers, but for all others, there's a limit of 5. And we expect that we could receive more than 5 applications. So that provision in the registration ordinance is all about how are we going to process these? Are we going to process, and what we've said is we're going to take them first come, first served, with the exception that if you're in that PID district, you go to the top. So we may have received 3 applications. They're not in the PID district. We get an application that comes in that's in PID. It goes to the top of that list as we're going down. So it doesn't, we could also get the first 10 applications that are received are not in the PID, and all of them end up being issued. All 5 end up being issued outside the PID district. It's a prioritization provision. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Ms. Heine. All right. Other issues you'd like to raise, council members? Councilmember Rameli?
Hi, sorry, just thank you, Mayor. A quick comment and question. I want to kind of agree with Councilmember Shack that my concern would be that if applications to the PID automatically get bumped up with a limit, you could have 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 come in for the PID and then knock out all of the other ones. So maybe we could still preference it, but think about how, if we want to be in a situation where we could potentially have all 5 in the PID. I echo Councilmember Shack's concern about that potential situation. And then my question would be, I just wanted to confirm my reading is that applications must be reviewed within 30 days. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor and Councilmember Rameli, that is a state law, so. And I think we're used to 60 days in a land use matter, but we have to change our gears on this one, 30 days.
Very good. Other concerns, or questions or comments? Councilmember Wilburn.
So I have a few. I won't, not as many as I made Mr. Funk listen to, but so the if you recall, when we voted on to put a moratorium so that we could sort of look at the state law and make sure that everything was as it should be, there was someone who spoke who was concerned that there was a pre-registration system with the state, and they were concerned that they would lose sort of their that they would be at a disadvantage. And I can't remember the parameters, but like certain individuals had preference for getting
Social equity. Yeah.
social equity. That's it. So, is there any consideration when we're doing our preferences, our ranking for social equity candidates?
So, Mayor.
Ms. Wishnack.
Thank you. Council members, the social equity application process has occurred. So those people are in waiting for cities to have ordinances to go ahead with their business plan. What we talked about during the moratorium is if the city doesn't adopt it before the end of the year, there's really no advance ability for those applicants to find spaces. So that's why we were so kind of set on getting this done in the fall, so that there would be a couple of months before all applicants would be able to get out to different sites. So if everything goes as planned, I think we have this on October 28th for final adoption. We'll get through the Planning Commission, hopefully get through the Park Board, and then be able to get back to you. That'll be 2 months in advance of other people. So the social equity applicants are reviewed by the state, not by the city, but that advance 2 months is really what I think we were trying to get to.
Okay, so
The advantage of time, basically.
to make sure I understand this, so if we get this done by October 28th, was that what you said?
That was the goal, yes.
Yeah. If we get this done by October 28th, then those social equity applicants, if there are any in Minnetonka, will have a chance to apply prior to others.
Any other kind of
Got it.
applicant.
Okay.
Yep. What was that?
Then my other question
Yes.
on the
Yes.
on the application process was, it says that if someone applies and don't meet the criteria, then you go to the next person on the list and invite them to reapply. And I'm just wondering, administratively, is there a reason why they have to reapply, or could you just hold on to applications and contact the next person and make sure that nothing has changed, as opposed to a full reapplication?
Mayor and Councilmember Wilburn, let us think about that issue. Let me talk to the team and maybe vet that a little bit for your next report. Thank
Okay.
you.
Then moving on for the, I don't remember which section it's in. When you talk about not allowing use within parks that have an amenity that where children frequent. So does that mean that use would be allowed in our reserves?
Say that again.
So we have parks and reserves.
Oh, preserves.
Preserves.
Okay, got
Sorry.
it.
It's
No. I was with you. Okay, preserves. Got
Preserves.
it. Yep.
And so there are preserves that we have
Yeah.
that don't have any playground equipment or but,
Right.
so I'm wondering, the way this is written, it sounds to me like there's currently not a.
Right. Let me try to answer your question, and then
Sure.
if I need help from Karine, I will call on her. I think that, let's just say you have a preserve and there's a constant youth programming event that takes place at the preserve. That would qualify as somewhere where minors are regularly partaking in a program or something like
Right.
that. We don't have that probably right now, but it could happen. But I would say generally, I don't see it happening. It just could. I mean, that is a possibility. Karine, do I have that right?
So there's two different aspects of when we're talking about parks. The 50 feet of specified facilities, what the ordinance says is outdoor swimming beaches, playgrounds, other outdoor facilities used for sports or athletics, a park shelter, a warming house, a refreshment stand, or a public restroom. Those are the specific facilities. They're identified in the ordinance. Wouldn't matter whether it was located in a park or in a preserve. I believe the preserves are parks.
Right.
They're parks. They're just a different category of park. So that's how that would apply. Then the buffer, which is in the registration ordinance, that's a buffer that the state law allows us to have from park facilities where minors, I don't have the language
Regularly
memorized,
used.
but that it would be similar. It would be similar facilities, but it's any park facility where minors are typically present. So those are the two different provisions. Public use deals with parks, and then the registration has a buffer from certain facilities.
So it's where it's being consumed versus where it's being sold.
Right.
This is the sold, and then this is the use.
Yeah, so now I'm wondering if, like, there might, because I'm confused, so I think there might be some confusion about, like, if you said, if there's going to be an event, a pumpkin carving event in one of our preserves that, like, then does that mean there's no cannabis use while that event is going on, but after they're gone, it can, so I don't know if there's a way to make that clear.
Well, what I would say is, with respect to, so the part that's in the registration ordinance, the public does not need to worry about. The staff determines, is it within the buffer? If it's within the buffer, they are not going to be registered. They are not going to be operating in the city. The issue about use in public spaces, as I said, those are very specific facilities. And it's, park shelters, warming houses, they're very specific. Okay. People shouldn't be confused about that. And then state law, not in this ordinance, state law has its own provision that says you can't smoke within a certain where minors are present. So it doesn't, they could be present anywhere in the city. You can't be smoking near them, and that's a state law regulation, not ours.
Okay.
I think, though, Councilmember Wilburn, let's write about that a little bit more. I think I can sense that there's a little bit of confusion, so I've written it down maybe for the next staff report to be a little clearer. Yes.
And then finally, so this is more, I had a question I had for Mr. Funk that's not specific to the city, but just I'm thinking that it might be something that our residents are wondering about as far as state ordinance. What are the rules as far as employers allowing or not allowing employees to be at work under the influence, and what, I guess, recourse would a resident have if they had an interaction with someone that they think is under the influence while they're doing business?
Mayor and Councilmember Wilburn, and this is how I answered with Councilmember Wilburn. When it comes to employee use, I mean, I broke it down probably in two different categories. One is we have control here with our city employees. And so for the city of Minnetonka, we have a robust personnel policy when it comes to drug, alcohol provisions. And so that policy has been already modified, that already recognizes cannabis use in that. So if an employee is deemed under the influence, we have a whole set of provisions that really kick into place to address that. For entities outside of the city of Minnetonka, we do not have purview over that. And I think what Councilmember Wilbur and I discussed earlier, for example, is like a daycare facility who has workers that might be under the influence. And certainly it would be up to those organizations to have their own personnel policies, as do we. I can't speak to, like, for example, a child care center, they're licensed by the state of Minnesota, and I can't speak to what the state has for requirements in terms of employee issues, but certainly we would encourage any organization, private or public, to review their own policies to ensure their workers are free of any type of drugs or alcohol.
Okay, last one, I promise. Just could you remind us for the public use, what is it's a misdemeanor if someone, or what's
It's a
the petty misdemeanor? Okay, thank you.
Dictated by state law. Maximum fine is, used to be 100 when I was prosecuting, it's probably higher.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, Councilmember Calvert?
I'll try to be very brief. I thought the comments that Councilmember Shack made were very cogent, and just thinking about trying to keep it simple and sort of in alignment with existing substances that people use. One of the things that, aside, there's a community member that talked to me at length in several conversations, but didn't want to write the city, and there were two concerns. One was just the exposure, both sort of societally and also physically, to secondhand smoke, because it's different if it's an edible or if it's a drinkable, if it's an edible, you're not going to affect someone standing next to you. But when people are smoking, that's something different, and kids can smell it and they can be influenced by that. So it was both the societal influence and also the exposure to secondhand smoke. And so thinking about the way we treat tobacco smoke, just trying to keep what we do in alignment with that. So I appreciate the state statute on not smoking in front of kids. So that should allay their fears there. But also, to Councilmember Shack's point, I think, if we make it too complicated, we start running into confusion and also enforceability issues, and also sort of plausible deniability issues. I didn't know because it's confusing, and so trying to keep it in alignment with the way that we do treat alcohol makes some sense to me. The only difference is there are field sobriety tests for alcohol, and there is not for any kind of THC that acts as some kind of psychoactive chemical. So it's a little bit different, but I just think it makes it a lot easier both for the public and for enforcement to try to keep it in alignment with the way we treat existing substances that are controlled.
Ms. Heine?
So just with respect to parks, there is a lot of similarity between this ordinance and how it's treating any use and the smoking. So we don't allow smoking within 50 feet of the various facilities. We can't, it's a bigger job to try to bring all of them in and treat them the same way, because our ordinances prohibit any alcohol anywhere in a park unless you have obtained a permit. We do allow smoking in the parks without permits, and I don't know if the council wants to go to a place where you're trying to bring alcohol and tobacco into the same place, but this is treating the cannabis use more like smoking. Mm-hmm. Or tobacco use, I should say. So I think that includes two.
Okay.
Thank you. Other comments from council members? Or questions, issues? Anyone? Councilmember Foster Bolton?
I think mine got answered, but back to the social equity piece. So right now, because of Councilmember Wilburn's suggestion, if if a person wants to register who's on the social equity and they're not in the PID, they're going to be put aside? I'm sorry. I guess I'm sorry, I forgot or something.
So there's nothing in the ordinance itself that specifically calls out social equity applicants or prioritizes them. There is a practical potential for social equity applicants to get their foot in the door sooner, because once we adopt the ordinance, the moratorium will go away. Social equity applicants have the ability under the state law to get pre-approval of their licenses, and they would be able to seek that pre-approval. So they have a foot in the door, but there's nothing in the ordinance that specifically calls them out or gives them priority.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Funk?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll make this brief. Just want to go back to, I think, it's already been mentioned, but I think it's worth repeating. So we will, I think, to Councilmember Shack's point and others that have been made, bring back a chart or a graph that shows the differences between where alcohol is allowed, not allowed, where regular, I say regular, if it's called regular anymore, regular tobacco, nicotine type tobacco can be smoked and not smoked, and then certainly tonight's conversation regarding cannabis. We'll try to lay that out in a more succinct way. But I think as already articulated, just keeping in mind that it will be hard to keep it consistent between all three of those uses, because as noted by City Attorney Heine, alcohol is not allowed anywhere on city property, public property, without a license or a permit. And an example of that would be like at a park shelter. So someone could apply for a liquor license at a park shelter if they're having a family gathering, a celebration, or whatever it may be. That's kind of when we see those instances of alcohol in a park situation. So we would not, this ordinance doesn't allow for permitting for cannabis use, for example. So that's where there's going to be a distinct difference between alcohol use and cannabis use. Because again, right now alcohol is not allowed anywhere unless by permit. What this ordinance does, I think, as Ms. Wishnack put up on here, is really reflective, excuse me, of our tobacco allowances and restrictions on regular tobacco use. So this more mirrors, again, tobacco usage in the city. So we're trying to be more consistent with tobacco, harder to do with alcohol. But again, I think just keeping that in mind as we bring this back, as we can kind of refine where we want uses and where we don't want uses. I would also point out, Mayor and Council, that we do have Chief Boardboom in the audience in case you have any questions regarding enforcement, because I think oftentimes, no matter the language that is approved with the final ordinance, just the challenges perhaps in enforcing that. So I do want to make sure that if you have any questions on enforcement, Chief Boardboom is here as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. Other questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Coakley.
I guess I do have a question on public use. When I was campaigning this summer, someone had asked me about, and I don't think this information covers what this person asked me, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. But he had asked me about using at like apartment buildings for owned townhomes, like if a person owns their property and they were smoking on their balcony, who would enforce that? And then he said something about there was like some cities that put ordinance in place that they could not smoke on their balconies because the smoke carried over to other folks' space, which impacted them. And so I'm just curious about that. Will our ordinance, if we put one in place, cover something like that if it's privately owned property?
Ms. Wishnack.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Coakley. There are a lot of different rules at play here. So in multifamily properties, and I'm just going to talk generally, there is a prohibition under the Indoor Clean Air Act that people cannot smoke in shared spaces. So, for instance, if you have an outdoor patio and that's considered a shared space, that would not be allowed. I should say like a screen porch or something like that. In their individual units, you have to check with each management. So there are rules for each management. In the case, I think you said townhome.
Yeah, it was
Depends
a
on what your HOA regulations are. So there's a couple of different things at play, and I would not attempt to make a statement about all multiple family property. I would only say that the Indoor Clean Air Act does cover some of that and prohibits any type of smoking, whether it be cannabis or vaping or cigarette smoking in shared spaces. So that's the law today. That will continue to be the law. The rest of it is managed by the company that owns it or manages the building. And then if you're in townhomes, HOA regulations would apply. So it just depends. Sorry, couldn't be more specific than that.
Okay, and I have one more question. I guess this one kind of also is similar to that one, like when you're in apartment buildings, say for instance you're outside and you're not inside the apartment building, but like I'll just use Minnetonka Heights for example, and they're smoking on the property, then would that be like an enforcement, criminal enforcement if someone's smoking on the property and someone makes a police call and they're on the property?
Ms. Wishnak.
Or
Ms. Heine, I'm reading body language here.
That's fine. Go ahead, Corinne.
No, so it might be best for us to sort of bring back a description of what the state law provisions are. State law requires landlords to ban smoking in the multifamily units. Outside of the unit itself, I would have to check the law. I believe that the landlord could allow it outside, but if the landlord prohibited it outside and the person was violating that, the city is not going to enforce that because we won't. We wouldn't have the ability to enforce it. It wouldn't be a crime. So, but if it's in a location where the Clean Indoor Air Act applies, the city could enforce that. And it is, smoking is banned in any place where tobacco smoke is banned, restaurants, etc.
And Ms. Wishnak, I
just
you
want
wanna
to add to what Corinne said. In the August 23rd memo from last year, a lot of this information is contained in that report. So if you need a little bit of a refresher about the Clean Indoor Act or any of these other state regulations that apply to smoking, that's in that report. So we'll bring that back again when we do a report to help you kind of parse through all these different laws and regulations. But if you want to look at it right away, the report from that date, I think I have it linked in the packet.
Thank you. Council, anything else?
I do. I do understand the indoor rule. I'm just talking about the outside, like not the Clean Air Act. That's not
right
outside.
Mayor and Councilmember Coakley, I think it just depends on the building rules. So if it's a multifamily dwelling and they have a what they would call a smoke-free building and property, then you could not do it. Again, as Corinne mentioned, it wouldn't be something the city would enforce. That's a property management issue. If the smoking was going on inside the building, yes, that could be considered a Clean Air Indoor Air Act violation. So just depends on how they're managing their property.
Okay. I don't know. I guess I would like to, and I know we can't do it now, but I guess I would like to talk a little bit more about like some education around that with the apartment people, because to me, like, is very limiting on where people can smoke. I mean, because we got the park regulation and, you know, the facility regulation. And, you know, as we, you know, approve this, I know people are going to be smoking, and they're probably going to be smoking on property. And I just don't want to continue to increase, you know, calls around folks smoking outside their building or smoking on the property, you know, smoking near the properties. You know, we've getting like folks complaining about folks walking up the street. So I don't want to start to get an increase in calls around, you know, people just smoking marijuana walking down the street or close to the property, because I don't know, I just see it as an increase. I see it as going to be a problem in the future. I don't see this as going to be a good thing for our city, even though it's all the state of Minnesota's moved to approve cannabis, and people are, you know, and people do it now, but I don't see it as a good thing, and I just see it as more of a problem, and it's going to me, probably increase more of a problem of calls and complaints and even discrimination. I can see this just being a big deal. So I don't know, hopefully it won't, but that's just my thought process.
Thank you, Councilmember Coakley. Anything else from anyone? Okay, a couple of quick comments and then a kind of a ticklish question, legal question that I will direct to the city attorney, and I'm confident my question does not have any good answer, but I'm going to raise it anyway. But in terms of what's been said tonight, I agree that anywhere we can get consistency makes sense. But I also think that, you know, I think smoking is different than alcohol consumption. And one question I have is, could we just prohibit cannabis use in our parks like we do alcohol? Is there any reason we could not do that? So that's one question.
You have the ability to prohibit it anywhere in parks. That would make it somewhat different than the way you're treating tobacco.
Right.
So we just need direction from the council on where you want to go with that.
Right. And I think most of the similarities exist with the way we treat tobacco. But where there's consistency with the way we treat alcohol is that tobacco is not an intoxicant. It's a psychoactive substance, but it is not an intoxicant. And so treating intoxicants, I could see us saying, okay, we're going to treat it just like smoking, except in the parks, because we prohibit use of intoxicants in the park, and cannabis is an intoxicant. So therefore, I could live with that consistency. Let's just keep it out of the parks. Simpler, easier, and let's just treat it like alcohol. The only exception I'd say is I can't see us licensing a party where you're going to allow people to use cannabis the way we might with alcohol. So that's one perspective. Then, but I think, you know, that being consistent in terms of distances, for example, 50 feet, the issues that are on the screen right before us, cannabis use in public places, I would ask kind of the rhetorical question is, what's the difference between a bus stop and a publicly operated transit station? I mean, it's a different form of transit, but it's transit. Why not be consistent? You know, I'd say 50 feet. I'm kind of happy with bigger buffers anyway. And so then the question on the when we go to sale, we go to 500 foot or 1,000 foot buffers. You know, what's wrong with 1,000 and 2,500 feet? How much latitude do we have in making our buffers bigger? You don't have to answer that question now. I'm just curious about that. One thing I would like before this comes back to better understand that is have a radius drawn around the Ridgedale Commons Park to see if we were going to put a restriction of 500 or 1,000 feet around any public park, how would that impact businesses in Ridgedale? Because it could be quite prejudicial depending on what we did there. And we didn't always have a park at Ridgedale, but now that we do. And then, just generally, I understand some of the concerns that Councilmember Shack raised, but when I think about the amount of commerce and the concentration of alcohol, of liquor stores, particularly in terms of volume, I think a significant majority of alcohol is sold in the Ridgedale area. So having a concentration within the Ridgedale area makes sense, and I think that's not just Ward 2, I think it's also Ward 3, and I don't know if we extend to other wards as well, but I think, on the one hand, I will be very honest, I am not a fan of the cannabis law. I think it's a bad law. I'm sorry that we've got it, but you know what? I believe in the rule of law, and so I'm going to support the law because I believe in the rule of law. So if it's the law of the land, it's the law of the land, and we have to live accordingly. So, but, I think if I wanted to really reduce cannabis use, which I think would be generally in the public interest, keeping away from the busiest commercial area in the city probably makes more sense than concentrating things there. But from a practical perspective, I think that the PID district has a lot of logic, and so after thinking about the pros and cons, I tend to agree with staff that it's the most logical place for us to have those businesses located. So then my kind of stump the band tricky question is, and Ms. Heine, correct me if my understanding of state law is incorrect, but we are required to have one dispensary for every 12,500 residents, and so that gives us 5 because we have slightly over 50,000 people in our city. However, I've heard that the measurement of that is not done on a city-by-city basis, but on a county basis. So my thought is that I think Hennepin County has roughly 1.25 million people in Hennepin County. And if my arithmetic is correct, that says that if the limit of 100, if there are 100 dispensaries in Hennepin County, but not in Minnetonka, we legally are not required to have any dispensaries in our city because the quota would be met by other communities, most likely Minneapolis, but perhaps others. Is my interpretation or my recollection of that law is that the measurement of the 1 in 12,500 residents is really a county number and not a city number, so we might be able to get away with fewer than 5 dispensaries.
So,
and you don't have to answer that tonight if you don't have the answer.
No,
I mean, it's a stump the band question a little bit.
No, the only thing I haven't checked is whether this particular provision was amended in the 2024 session. I can check that. But
Yep.
what the statute says is a local government unit that issues registrations can limit, and the 12,500 applies to the local government unit that is issuing the registrations. If you defer and do not have the city issue the registrations, but you turn it over to Hennepin County, then the limit will apply for the county, but there are individual cities within the county that are doing their own registrations.
Right.
You will not control. So
Right.
it will apply to the county if the county is doing the registrations.
All right.
It applies to the city if the city is doing the registrations.
Well, you've answered my question. That clarification is
Yeah.
helpful. And
And-
being an advocate of local control, that probably flies in the face of my my publicly stated position. So.
And your other
I'm good with
question
that.
was about distances. That 1,000 feet from
Yeah.
a school is the maximum that's allowed by state
Okay.
law.
All
The
right.
500 from a park is the maximum that's allowed.
Okay.
Not from a park, from a park facility where children are likely to be present. that 500 distance is dictated by state law.
Very good. Well, I want to thank staff. You know, the staff recommendations I felt were generally as restrictive as the law as written allows. And I want to just generally say I'm supportive of that. I think that we should exercise the level of control we have available to us. And I think that the staff recommendation does that. You know, I would be interested in the, you know, as this comes back, you know, the consideration of, you know, as far as the parks go, are we more interested in treating cannabis like we would treat tobacco in the parks, an allowed use except in specific areas, or would we prefer to have an outright prohibition like we have for alcohol in the parks? And I think that's a worthwhile question for the council and perhaps our advisory commissions to consider, whether it be the park board or the planning commission. Other than that, I think I appreciate the good work that's been done on this, and you know, this is a challenging one. It's not fun, but it's what we do, and whether we like the law or not, we have to uphold it. So, Ms. Wishnak, I will end there.
I just want to make sure Mayor and Council were all on the same page, so I want to make sure I just kind of go over everything that I heard.
I'm stating my preferences, not the council's preferences.
So I'll just summarize, and then when I'm done, maybe if I missed something, you can let me know. So, and I'll go subject by subject. We'll do the registration. I really didn't hear anything on registration except for the PID itself and whether or not that was an acceptable kind of preferential notation. That will go to the Planning Commission even though it's in the registration portion of the ordinance. The other thing on that, I heard applications, order, process, how does that all work, and be clear about that, and reapplying for a registration application. I think I have most of what you said on registration. Also clarification on 1,000 or 500 and what that does and the maps that go along with that. But again, I didn't hear any major issues with that, just kind of understanding and information. On the zoning ordinance piece, I heard basically nothing that needs work. So I think we probably have consensus at least what ordinance we're showing the Planning Commission. Public use was all over the place. So we're going to have to, I'm going to go back and read what you talked about at your study session the last time, because that's how we got to this version of the ordinance. We're going to make you some better charts, though, and compare some things for you. And I think, Mayor, as you said, maybe just some, whether or not you want to outright prohibit it in parks is probably the question at hand. But some of that 50 and 25 foot has to do with state law, so we'll go back and reiterate why we chose those things. But
and that clarification, I think, would be all that's necessary. If it's state law, let's not waste our time on it. Let's move on.
Okay. So I know it was a lot of discussion, but that's what I distilled down from it. So hopefully I was right. But did I forget anything?
You often are. Council, anything to add on Ms. Wishnak's summary? Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to do something that everyone will agree with. We're going to take a break right now. So we'll take, we'll come back in 5 to 7 minutes and we'll get started again. So thank you all.
Are you going to make the motion before break or no?
Oh,
for
do
introduction?
We have to do that, or can we just take a break?
I don't care. Doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. We should introduce the ordinance before. Yes, well, let's do that. And then we're going to take a break. I'm sorry. Councilor Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make the motion to introduce the ordinances on cannabis and refer the zoning ordinance amendment to the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
And Park Board.
And the Park
Board. Councilor Wilburn.
I will second. Oh.
All right. And then, so we've got a motion by Councilor Calvert and a second by Councilor Wilburn. And we're referring the ordinance to the Planning Commission and the Park Board. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton?
Yes.
Shack?
Yes.
Wilburn?
Yes.
Calvert?
Yes.
Rameli?
Yes.
Coakley?
Yes.
Wearsome?
Yes, motion carries. We're not going to take a motion on taking a break. We're just going to take a break. All right. That was a little longer than 5 minutes, but we'll get started. So, next item on the agenda, after items relating to cannabis, is item 13, public hearings. And we have two tonight. And the first is on the 13A is the Community Development Block Grant Program Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for the year 2023. And Ms. Wishnak, that's your report.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This is a report and a public hearing on the Community Development Block Grant Program. It is an annual performance report that we have to prepare in certain cases. And so if you weren't aware, before 2018, Minnetonka was an entitlement city and we directly received those funds. After that, we went to the county and consolidated our pool of resources. But during that time, we did get some paybacks and some money back from clients and customers, and that accumulated balance was about $219,000 that could be used for other purposes. And in November of 2020, so 4 years ago, the council directed staff to provide a new program, a new grant program for folks that owned through the Hennepin Land Trust, West Hennepin Land Trust, or Homes Within Reach, and it was specifically a grant program for people who needed repairs to their homes. And the amount was about $7,500 per home could be eligible. 24 homes actually took advantage of the grant program and did benefit from that program. And I think what's interesting about this report is you'll see on the next slide that it looks like we helped 2 homes, but actually we helped 24 homes. Because of the reporting period, it's just a little bit off. So when I get to that, I'll remind you that how many we totally helped. But for this report, the official report, it would be 2. So there was a balance of $43,000, which remained in the fund that was unspent, that expired on September 30th. Just a note, over those 4 years, we sent many reminders and lots of information, and reminders also to the folks at Homes Within Reach that this money was available. Because those funds were not spent, they do have to be remitted back to HUD, so that has to occur. And then submitting this report too has to go along with those funds. So for the year that we're reporting on, which is 2023, almost $16,000 was spent for rehabilitation. 50% of the assisted home owners were people of color, and of all the families that were assisted, they were all below the 80% AMI household income. So the public comment period ran from September 19th through October 3rd. We actually didn't receive any comments on this report. So for the City Council, you'll have to open the public hearing and take any public input that is available to you tonight. And then if we do receive any comments, those also have to be included in the report back to HUD. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Wishnak. Council, any questions on the Community Development Block Grant Report from Ms. Wishnak? Any questions? One quick one. Do you think there's anything more we could have done? I hate to give money back. Is there anything more we could have done, in your view, to get that money spent?
Mayor and council members, if I thought we could have, we would definitely would have. I think communicating directly by phone to people, calling people to, if we ran into people that were coming through our other programs, like our rehab loan programs, we were often referring them if they were Homes Within Reach home. Sometimes people were ready for projects and sometimes they weren't. I think that's sometimes a challenge with home improvement projects. People just sometimes delay and then sometimes it's just too late. So I think definitely there was awareness, and I was happy to have been able to reach that many homes. But yeah, of course you want to spend all the money if you can.
All right, well, thank you. And there was no critique in my question. I just thought if there might have been something that we could have done differently. But anyway, thank you for that. No questions from council, so I will take this opportunity to open the public hearing. And is there anyone who would like to comment on this matter? Anyone in the audience? I know we don't have any call-ins tonight. Is there anyone? All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask council for comments or motion. Councilor Calvert.
I have no comments, so I would like to make the motion to adopt the resolution concerning the community development block grant consolidated annual performance and evaluation report for 2023.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Coakley.
I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Calvert and a second by Councilmember Coakley. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton.
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wilburn.
Yes.
Calvert.
Yes.
Romalee.
Yes.
Coakley.
Yes.
Wearsum.
Yes, motion carries. So item 13B is our second public hearing item, and it is, 13B is the use of the Community Investment Fund to finance renovation of the Arena Rink B refrigeration improvement project. And Mr. Manchester, that is your report.
It is. Good evening again, Mayor and Council. So before you use the use of the Community Investment Fund to to finance renovation of the Ice Rink B refrigeration system, I did want to introduce a couple other team members that are here. Mr. John Heckman, Kevin Moss, and Darren Nelson. We're here with us tonight working on this as well. So the Ice Arena Rink B refrigeration improvements proposes to install a new ammonia refrigeration system to Rink B, and it replaces the existing R22 refrigerant and refrigeration equipment as it's expended its useful life. Funding from the project is proposed from the Community Investment Fund, which requires 2 public hearings, at least 30 days apart tonight, which would be the first. The existing refrigeration system was installed in 2003 and uses a combination of glycol and R22 refrigerant. The U.S. EPA banned the production and import of the refrigerant January 1st of 2020. So, at this point, refrigerant is not as available as well as it's banned by the EPA, the use of it. So it's tougher to get and it's certainly more expensive. So we're working on replacing our systems, which is part of the requirement, and that's why we're here tonight. So the proposed improvements include installation of a new ammonia system for Rink B, including the demo of the R22 system, as well as HVAC wiring, electrical systems, and then a new structure to support the system. So the system would include a new ammonia dispersion tank. It would have a detection system with alarms to make certain that system was safe, just to maintain the operation, and that would have dialers as well to alert anyone of any type of alarm or leak or anything that could potentially occur. So we'll make sure the system is safe. We would look at a bid alternate to be included with the project that would look at some components of software and coordinating this system with other systems as well at the city. If the project anticipation, the schedule would look at a 3-month construction, so it would be over the summer in 2025 as proposed. There are some lead times with this equipment, so it's potentially around 6 months. It would need to be ordered later this year to meet that schedule. The ice rink does provide a large portion of ice time for the city. It is used by Minnetonka and Hopkins community, primarily the Lake Minnetonka Figure Skating Club, Youth Hockey Association, as well as boys and girls programs for Minnetonka and Hopkins high schools. And so with that, I'll keep it short and I'll turn it back to the mayor and council with 3 recommendations tonight. The first being to open the public hearing and accept any comments. Continue the public hearing to November 18th, and then order the improvements, accept the plans and specifications, and then authorize an ad for bid for the project, which would come back at the next meeting. So with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor. Any questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Manchester. Council, any questions for Mr. Manchester regarding this refrigeration project? Councilmember Romalee.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a specific question regarding the refrigeration project. I do have a question/comment perhaps for the manager of the hockey, or of the ice rink and the arena, which would be, or staff, which would be, is the ice, and this is apropos of some other conversations we've had about community facilities, namely, is the ice a paid amenity that our residents have to pay for to access, or is it freely accessible to anybody walking in?
Good
Mr.
question.
Heckman?
Okay.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Well, thank you very much.
We don't get yet very many council meetings, so it's
Can I
kind of
raise
nice.
it up?
Yeah, you may.
absolutely.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you, Mayor Wearsome and Councilmember Ramley, council members. It is a paid amenity. Almost all of our programs do require a fee, whether it is ice rental to our community user groups, as Will mentioned already, or it could be just for public skate, could be our Learn to Skate program, anything of the such. So even a public skate session does have a minimal fee.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there, go ahead. Well, we'll do we'll finish finish questions, and then we'll.
Can I
we'll-
finish my
Yes, you may, absolutely.
Right now? Or
Yes.
wait,
No,
okay. So just to follow up on that, again, apropos of other discussions we've had on facilities, I would just like to kind of make that public comment that, for our ice arena, it's not something that anybody can walk in like a park and use, and I would ask that we keep that in mind, considering our other community facilities like the Marsh and Williston. So just make that comment and end it there.
All right,
Where
and
we
then,
make capital investments in those things, we hope that they operationally break even though the ice arena is not doing so right now. We're hoping this capital investment helps so that it can make it so. And, hopefully we will take the same approach with some of the other community facilities we're considering investing in later years. Thank you.
all right, I'm going to dial it back a little bit before I take other council comments. Any more questions? Because we do have a public hearing. So I think before we make comments, we want to have the benefit of anyone in the audience who wants to comment. So I will open the public hearing and ask if there is anyone here who would like to comment on this issue. And I'm not seeing anybody, but because I'll ask again because I should. Would anyone like to comment on this matter? If not, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for comments. So, Councilmember Wilburn, I anticipate that you may have a comment.
How did you know? So sort of along the lines of what Councilmember Ramale was speaking of, I know we've had in the past some people who have objected to us spending money on things like the ice rink, and I think it's a bigger conversation than what we're going to have just tonight. But what's our strategy as a city? What as far as investing in community programs and facilities? So for instance, I don't play pickleball, and I would hazard a guess that more people in Minnetonka don't play pickleball than do play pickleball, yet the people that do play pickleball really value the facilities. And I think it adds value to our city to offer programs that maybe not everybody uses, but makes the city attractive because we do provide so many different services. So that is my opinion, that I think it's worthwhile for us to invest in things like the ice rink, which may not make money. We are always hopeful that we can get to a place where we make money, but I think there is still value in providing these services throughout the city, including the ice rink, the Marsh, Williston, Shady Oak Beach, et cetera, et cetera. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilburn. Are there other comments? I will add that I agree with what my fellow council members have said. I don't think there's anybody in the city who uses all of the facilities and all of the programs that the city offers. And some of our programs are totally free of charge, and many of our programs require either a nominal charge or more than a nominal charge. I mean, I spend a lot of time at City Hall, and you should see all of the seniors who come in here and participate in free exercise programs, but they also participate in field trips and lectures where they have to pay a speaker and so forth. And that's what makes a community a community. And we talk about community building, and it's resources like the ice rinks that we have available for people who want to free skate, for hockey teams. Now, I'll admit that if we were in Atlanta, for example, maybe we wouldn't have as many hockey rinks in our community. But hockey's a big deal in Minnesota, and it's important to offer amenities that make our city attractive. So I think in this improvement, I would love it if we didn't need to change refrigeration systems, but we do. And we have to stay up with the technology, and I think that our investment in a rink is consistent with the values of our community, even though not every family has a kid who plays hockey or figure skates. It's an important amenity to our community. So I'm supportive of this and agree with what my fellow council members have said. And that's part of what we do. As a council, is we determine the policies that reflect the values of our community and enrich the experiences of our residents. So I can go on, but I won't. If someone would like to make a motion, that'd be great. Councilmember Wilburn.
So we already opened so I make the motion to continue the public hearing to November 18th, 2024. Do I make the third one as well right now? And to order the improvements, accept the plans and specifications, and authorize the advertisement for a bid for Ice Arena Rink B refrigeration improvement project.
And is there a second? Councilmember Rameli.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Wilburn and a second by Councilmember Rameli. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack,
Yes.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Rameli,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight, for sticking around for so long. Appreciate that. Item 14B is Minnesota Housing Loans Programs. Ms. Wishnack. Did I miss one? Oh, excuse me. I didn't mean to jump over. I apologize. 14B. My eyes are kind of. Never mind. Item 14B is 14A. Excuse me. A is everyone's favorite topic: recycling and organics contract discussion, 2025 to 2027. Mr. Manchester, you're still up. Obviously,
Yep,
it's
thanks,
time
Mayor.
for me to be done.
I was hoping you missed me, but thanks. I appreciate it.
Go
Good
ahead.
evening again. We'll kind of run through a presentation. I did want to introduce Darren Ellingson. He's here, our operations manager, and then Matt Herman is here, also from Republic as well. He doesn't plan to speak, but certainly here for questions if anything comes up. So just to kind of talk about some background, in December of 2021, the city entered into an agreement with Republic for organized recycling curbside. And so we, at that time, had a contract for 22 to 24. Earlier in that year, staff had reviewed multiple options for organics at the time as well, and council at that time decided to have organics be funneled, I guess, through the garbage haulers at that time. There's a couple different options, but opted to use the garbage service to meet the requirements of Hennepin County. And so at this time, the Republic Services contract is set to expire at the end of 24, and so we're looking at what to do with the next cycle. Just some background and info on recycling. Residential curbside pickup is mixed recyclables, paper, cartons, glass, plastic, and metal. As part of the recycling, we also have the 24-hour drop-off center at Public Works, which has a number of containers to be served. We service 7 days a week, as well as there's additional containers around the holidays. We also have an organics container there as well for that type of drop-off. Staff at this time did negotiate for council's consideration tonight, certainly. the next 3-year cycle, 25 to 27, and so that's what we're here to talk about. We did look at an RFP process, which is certainly an option still, but based on the negotiation, we did get a price we'd like to talk to you about, which we think is very reasonable, and so that's why we're here. The cities of Maple Grove and Plymouth have recently done a similar path as well. Just regarding collection rates, so Republic is proposing an increase of about 5.2% to 25, and this is just the recycling piece of it, and then a 4.5% increase over the next 2 years is kind of their offer at this time. In the previous contract, we did get charged additional for contamination as well as additional dumpsters containers, and they did take that out, so there would be no additional charge for that. That would be included at this point. Regarding organics, as I mentioned before, there is the county ordinance state law. In January of 24, residents were required an organics fee regardless of participation, so this is handled through the garbage haulers. There's a range on, depending on your hauler, certainly the price can vary. At this point, Republic has proposed an option for organized organics recycling collection that we could include with our recycling collection. It would be a variable schedule based on participation. The city would need to add this service through their billing, and so something we'd certainly have to work with finance on. It would come off of their garbage haulers, and the city would pick up that piece if council does choose to move forward. And then we would work with the garbage haulers and a communications plan, certainly, if that change were to be made. As mentioned, the cost is variable based on participation. We did discuss this with Republic quite a bit. Certainly, there's an economy of scale on some things. In this case, there's stops that would be required based on the participation, so it changes that level, and so that's why there is an increase as the participation increases. We did look at a number of comparable cities. Certainly, that's the reason we're here tonight. When we looked at the prices other cities are getting, or current prices, we did call all these cities to confirm this. This is kind of an overview of where we would fall if we were to move forward or council decides to move forward with it. And it does vary, it depends on certainly when contracts were put into place, who the contract is with. I mean, there's a number of factors that play into this. Now, the estimated cost in 2025 would certainly change if council were to choose to go forward, organized organics, adding that, as well as inflation. We would potentially be projecting a $3.50 to $5. We would come back with council if they so choose with a contract at a future meeting. Right now, the current cost per month is $7.33, which includes everything. It includes leaf and brush drop, just recycling, leaf and brush, and then the recycling center. If council were to decide to add organics, we would look at a change of, $10 or $11 to $12 in that range the city would need to bill. That would include curbside recycling, curbside organics, 24-hour recycling center, and drop off, and then the leaf and brush drop as well. And we would need to bring that back to council with a contract through Republic if they so choose to go that route. There would be communication certainly that would be needed as part of this process. If the garbage haulers would no longer participate in the organics collection, we would certainly have to promote that or communicate that. There'd be a number of channels we would do. We have talked with Plymouth and Maple Grove to understand what they did when they made the change, so we'd certainly use a similar process or what works best for us, of course. We would come back likely in November, early December with a contract if you were to choose to move forward at this point, and then we would have a communications plan as well on how things would proceed moving forward. So recommended action tonight would be to direct staff to proceed with the contract negotiations for 25 to 27 and include organized curbside organic recycling collection with the curbside recycling. So I'll turn it back to the mayor and council for any questions or discussion. Thanks.
All right. Well, we'll start with questions. Does anyone have any questions from Mr. Manchester's report on this topic? Councilor Romali.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you confirm, Mr. Manchester, what the conditions of this extension are. My understanding is this is extended on the basis of not doing an RFP to other potential bidders. Is that correct?
Councilmember Rameli, Council Mayor, that is correct. We would propose to extend the contract for 3 years and not do an RFP at this point. Certainly would be an option for council if they wanted to consider an RFP.
Follow up, go ahead.
Yeah, and am I also correct in understanding that basically the main reason that staff is suggesting that is because Republic will not kind of hold to those prices if we do an RFP. So basically they're saying there's a little bit of blackmail going on.
Councilmember Mealy, Council and Mayor, they did offer this price based on their current setup. I mean, they certainly could come in with this price in RFP. They haven't said they wouldn't, but they said, this is the price they're offering. Certainly they'd look at other factors if an RFP would go out, but that's where they left it. So yes, this is the current price.
All right, thank you. I'll hold for now.
All right, any other comments or questions, rather? Councilmember Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. On page 3 of the supplemental background information, there's a chart of all the cities and their recycling and their contractor, and it's just so interesting because, they're saying we're getting a heck of a deal. And I read the report. I had trouble hearing what you were saying. But for instance, Plymouth, their recycling would be less expensive. So it's not an across the board pricing. So I just, we may be getting somewhat of a better deal, but it just seems a little bit, I really am still having a trouble understanding that sliding price range based on numbers. Is that what this reflects?
Councilmember Calvert, Mayor and Council, it does. The prices are different when we ask the same question. Certainly when we talked with Republic, it depends on the number of residents, how the city's set up. There's certainly other factors that go into it.
And it sounded like the more people that participated, the price went up, not down, which seems a little counterintuitive.
Correct. On the organic piece of it, the price does show to go up based on participation. We asked the same question.
Because that just seems, that is just a terrible way to get people to participate.
Yeah, and just to clarify further, our understanding is there's a number of stops that are required with the participation, and so there's definitely more time involved. If you're at 10% versus 20%, if you're stopping at a whole number of homes, there's definitely more time involved and costs that go with that.
And then just to understand, so in full disclosure, as part of my question, I left Republic because they were only picking up my garbage when it seemed to be convenient to pick it up for some months. It was sort of an ongoing thing. And then when I called to talk to the customer service, they weren't very nice about it. So I went to another vendor. So basically we're going to cut out all the other vendors that frankly had better service all along and are significantly cheaper. And this is not just for organics, it's for organics and recycling. So help me understand, if we do this contract without an RFP, we are cutting out the other vendors from those activities, or is it that residents will be paying for that service to Republic and whatever other service they've contracted with?
Sure, Councilmember Calvert, to clarify, the city would take on it was proposed to take on the organics piece, and so based on that participation chart, that would be the fee that the city pay Republic for the organics piece. The individual garbage haulers, we would work with them similar to what Plymouth and Maple Grove have done to take that organic piece off of their garbage bill. And so there would be a change. Based on what we're seeing, there would be a decrease. I mean, certainly we can't guarantee what the garbage haulers would do, but there would be a decrease in the organics cost from what we're seeing, which is why we're proposing to move forward at this time based on the price. I mean, we could certainly go out to the RFP. We did analyze this a lot, to be honest. We take it very seriously. The price that we're getting seems very good to us, and that's why we're proposing it tonight. You know, the other cities around us, did Plymouth get $4.75? Yes. We're not in Maple Grove the same. We got a lower rate on our increase per year, so there's other factors that go into it, but we wouldn't recommend it to you if we didn't think it was a really good deal, to be honest. And I understand it takes away the RFP. If we do an RFP, we would need to take the lowest bid at that time, and you know, there's no guarantee on what we could get. It could certainly change that way. So that's some of the risk involved, but that's why we're recommending it.
Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Foster Bolton.
And we could revisit this in 3 years. Like all of this would go away. We could.
Councilmember, yes, in 3 years, it would only be good for 3 years, certainly.
But then we'd have to go through all the process of recharging the garbage haulers. Or they would have to recharge. Like the price would be redispensed again.
Correct. Yeah, there would be another cycle, and we could choose at that time to do an RFP, or we could look at another extension.
Are there other questions, Council? Or Councilmember Coakley, thank you.
That's okay.
It's getting late.
I was about to say I'm tired too, so I get it.
Pardon me. Councilmember Coakley, thank you.
I was going to say I didn't see Southwest hauler up here, and just was wondering, do you have their prices and fees? And yeah.
Yeah, Councilmember Coakley and Council, we don't have it on here. We could certainly get that, though, if it's something you would like to see.
That's who I use, so that's why I was curious. I noticed it, like, oh, they're not there. But just curious about, like, making sure that we compare all the prices versus just some of them, because Southwest hauler actually is cheaper than Republic. And so I'm wondering how much is their organics, and I haven't looked at my bill lately, so I'm just wondering about that, because I don't think we're going to be able to make a clear decision without Southwest price.
Yeah, I don't have it here tonight. I don't know if Mr. Ellingson's talked to them at all or not. But
Councilmember Mailey.
I can say on an individual level that it's $6 a month.
All right. Do we have any other questions or council comments on this? Councilmember Wilburn.
So I have some reservations, and sort of what Councilmember Calvert was alluding to. When Republic bought Randy's, the transition was not smooth, and there were lots of complaints. And personally, my bill went up significantly to the point 30%. I had alert. I had a ceiling. I had auto pay, but a ceiling on the amount, and like every month I would get an alert that the amount I was being charged was over what my limit had been set at. And it was not communicated well that any of this increase had to do with the recycle or the organics fee that was required by the county. At least I didn't see communication at all. So I have reservations about signing a 3-year contract where, what are our options if service is not what we would like it to be.
Mr. Funk.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. I would just point out a couple things. This is a really good conversation. I think in my conversation with you today, this is the kind of the philosophical approach for the city of what's the best approach and what kind of risk is the city willing to take. Maybe two things I would point out to you. What staff is recommending, if you were comfortable with proceeding with a contract, part of that contract provision of termination clauses would need to be visited, and so we want to negotiate that too with the contractor. So while we're suggesting a contract would be extended for 3 years based on the pricing that's before you, we would want to look at certain types of termination clauses. So if there is underperformance or if there are concerns with how the service is being provided, that we have some sort of out between now and 3 years. So that way we're locked in for 3 years, but then have certainly out provisions in those termination language. So we would want to certainly evaluate that very closely in bringing that contract back to you. So I give you that point. And then second, and maybe Mr. Manchester can speak to this a little bit, on the screen in front of you, what staff has provided is a summary of, again, comparables to other cities. What you'll notice in that contractor column is you see Republic listed quite frequently through there. So when you look at how many companies are available to do this size and scope of work, there aren't a lot of players in this space. So you're going to see Republic, you're going to see Waste Management, and perhaps there are one or two others. And so just want to point that out as well, is that if we go out for an RFP, certainly that risk is there, and then looking at who would actually then put in for that type of, in a proposal like this.
Councilmember O'Malley. Oops, excuse me. Councilmember Shack, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I appreciate the comments of my council members, and my instinct initially when I read the packet was, gosh, it feels a little bit like we're over the barrel. However, and I will acknowledge there's a resident in my house that is not a big fan of Republic either and has transitioned to a different carrier as well, so he may disagree with my position on this. But, you know, we work really hard to, and we talk a lot about fees that our residents are paying and trying to keep those down as much as possible. And we also talk about where can we find efficiencies. And so my instinct is there is, you know, this is a collectively, particularly when we look at the organics and the recycling together, this is a competitive, probably as low of a rate as we can get. And so, you know, part of me says, well, let's do the work. Let's get the RFP. But there's not efficiency in that. And so much to my closely related residents' dismay, I would probably say this makes the most sense. And what I will say, I mean, we put a lot of utilities through the ringer today, but I have not had a problem with recycling. The recycling has been consistent. It's clear that Republic has the capacity to do the recycling. I tell you, we did recycling in when we lived in St. Louis Park, and that did not go well. I mean, that was organized, obviously, recycling as well. And so I've experienced bad service in that inconsistency, and we would get demerits a lot. But my inclination is to go forward with this. Let's make the decision. Let's move on. Let's get a contract. But it's not a hill I'm going to die on. So that's my opinion.
Councilmember Foster Bolton, your body language looks like you want to say something.
Well, I was going to agree just because I think that if we asked the residents, they would all say, take the deal. Because they would look at the price. And they might. They might hate Republic. I mean, we don't like them either, but it's the best price. And like you said, we try to do that.
Councilmember O'Malley.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, staff, thank you for doing all this work. I understand that you're kind of fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility, basically, to get us the lowest price. So, you know, hats off, thank you to that. I also understand the efficiency argument. I am concerned about being over a barrel, for one thing, but also preferencing and giving this outright to Republic to the potential detriment to other local companies. I'm worried about or concerned about the continued existence of local companies like Southwest or South Suburban and the monopolization by a company like Republic. I am concerned that what happens so often in these cases is that one company will drive out the competition and then raise its prices 3 years down the line because they're the only game in town at that point because they've driven out the competition. So to me, I get it, lowest price is important, but it isn't everything, and you also have to take a longer term view. And I am concerned about knocking out our other local family-owned regional competition. Maybe they don't have the capacity, but I'm concerned about not letting them get a shot at that. And if Republic wants to ding us on that for doing that, well, I guess shame on them.
Are there other comments? Councilor Calvert?
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like I'm very much in alignment with Councilmember Shack's comments. I also I hear what Councilmember Romali is saying. The thing is, we do hear from our residents about fees, and I have 2 new residents who are closely related to me that, moved 5 minutes from my house and live in Minnetonka and are in sticker shock over the price of utilities and other things here in Minnesota. And so, I feel a little bit better if we can drive a hard bargain on the right to terminate. I do understand what Councilmember Romali is saying because we need an option to terminate too. And if we do eliminate the competition, then it becomes exceedingly difficult. And then we are over a barrel. And so I think she has a point, but I also feel like, when we're raising the levy, and so is everybody else, and, we hear a lot about inflation, and, we'll be hearing from our residents, and Xcel told us that they're raising their rates and so on and so on. I do feel like we need to take an opportunity to reduce rates. I also do feel like we sort of have a gun to our head. So I don't really like the way this is unfolding, and it makes me feel deeply uncomfortable, which is why I really respect what Councilmember Romali was saying. But I also agree there are efficiencies here. We have that divide in the city where 88% of residents or 85% of residents want organized trash, but nobody wants to give up their trash collector. And so this is a way to organize at least part of that and maybe reduce some of the truck traffic, maybe, even though I'm sticking with my vendor for the trash because Southwest has been Johnny on the spot every time it's trash day. So, maybe we try it and we see how it goes. And honestly, I want really clear parameters in the contract about termination, because, they haven't always met the bar.
Anyone else? Okay, you get my 2 cents too. Minnetonka does not have organized collection, and regular trash hauling is the lion's share of the business, as I understand things. So whatever decision we make on recycling and organics, I don't think it's going to be a difference maker on the survival or failure of anyone who happens to be in this business. I don't know that for a fact. That's my personal opinion. We're not talking about organized collection here. We're talking about recycling and organics. I agree with I agree with what Councilmember Shack said, and also the fact that costs are going up, and I believe that staff has done a pretty good job of negotiating as good a deal as we're probably going to get from Republic or from anyone. And I want to be mindful of cost because cost is important to our residents. But also, our recycling and organics are important to our residents. And you know, the question is, why do costs go up when more people participate? Well, it's because there's going to be more trash and more stops and all of the things that drive the cost up of picking organics up. Everyone's paying. Understand, everyone. If we only have 10% of people participating, 100% of people are paying, and they have 10% pickup. But if they have 20% pickup, well, their costs have probably almost doubled, at least their variable costs. So that's why we see a rising schedule. I'm comfortable with that. So I think getting the best deal we can for 3 years with reasonable termination commitment makes a lot of sense. I will say that the transition from Randy's to Republic was uncomfortable for probably a lot of us sitting up here and a lot of our residents, but things have really improved. And I'll tell you what, as somebody who's been in business for a long time, mergers and acquisitions are brutal, and some just plain fail. And I don't think we're there with Republic. I think, and the city does a lot of business with Republic. I mean, they handle our recycling. At city, I mean, they do more than just pick up for our residents. So I think some economies of scale on recycling and organics makes sense. Recycling is just such a challenging area these days because what happens to recycling? Is it really recycled? Where does it go? Is a question that I've got. But I think going for some efficiency here. It's not a permanent decision. It's a 3-year decision. If we've made a mistake between a termination and a 3-year length of contract, we can look to Republic to earn our trust and earn our business. I really believe things have improved a lot since the Randy's acquisition first took place. So I'm supportive of staff recommendation. And so with that, I know we probably have kind of a mixed bag here, but if someone would like to make a motion, I will, or has any other comments, we'll take a motion. Anyone? Councilmember Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make the motion to
well, it's really just direct. It's not really a motion, is it?
Oh, yeah. So I'd like to direct staff to proceed with contract negotiations for the 2025 through 2027 city organized curbside recycling with Republic Services, including organics recycling collection.
So from a process perspective, should we just treat this like a motion and see how we stack up, or is there a consensus among council members or our counter opinions? Because we really don't have an action, do we, or do we?
Mayor and council, I would advise that to continue with the direction that you're on. You have a motion to directing staff. And I think that just helps staff make it clear on what we're going to do.
Okay. So we've got a motion by Councilmember Calvert. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Foster Bolton.
I'll second.
All right. We've got a motion by Councilmember Calvert and a second by Councilmember Foster Bolton. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton.
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wilburn.
Yes.
Calvert.
Yes.
Romalee.
No.
Coakley.
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. So, Mr. Funk,
Yeah,
excuse me.
thank you, Mayor Wearsome and council. I would just maybe add that, thank you for your direction. We heard your comments tonight, all very valid. I think as staff knew this would be the conversation you had here this evening, because there's no right or wrong in this. It's just really what you're most comfortable with, and with all the reasons you've already mentioned. What we'll do is, per your direction, continue to work with Republic Services and bring back a contract for your approval. And it's even at that time when we bring back a contract, if you have some level of uncomfortability with that contract, where we don't feel like the termination provisions are to our benefit, then we also could still proceed with an RFP. So that still isn't off the table. So I think that we're going to continue with negotiations, bring back a deal that is beneficial for the city, and if not, we can also proceed to an RFP at that time. We might have to look at timing because our contract ends at the end of this year, and so if we were to go an RFP at a later time, we'd have to work with Republic on some sort of bridge between that and when the RFP process plays out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. All right. So let's see. We've done this one. We can go on to the next one after trying to get there earlier. Item 14B is Minnesota Housing Loans Programs, and Ms. Wishnack, that is your
Thank you.
report.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This is just some additional funding for the two programs that have had a lot of success. The Welcome to Minnetonka program, which is a down payment assistance program, which is providing loans up to $50,000. And then the enhancement program, which is a low interest loan up to $15,000 for eligible home repairs. And as you know, the HRA levy is approved every year. And if you don't know, we track exactly what you said you were going to spend the money on. If that changes over the year, then you have to amend that and reallocate those funds. Currently, though, you have about $500,000 sitting in the fund balance of the HRA levy that is designated for home rehab or home down payment programs. Additionally, the EIP that you just adopted does talk about $100,000 more being allocated in 2025 for the two programs. So staff is recommending that the City Council authorize already allocated funds to CEE, which is our provider of these loan programs. $200 for the Welcome to Minnetonka down payment, and then $100 for the Minnetonka home enhancement. There also are some changes to the guidelines, and so you'll see some of that paperwork in the back of the packet that talk about the guidelines and just minor changes. You can see the interest rate changing to 0, 10% of the purchase price with a maximum of $50,000 for the loan amount. The home buyer contribution too, we've dropped that from 25 to 1% of the purchase price. Has to be the borrower's own funds, and this is because there's other matching funds out there, and so we're finding kind of friction with that particular issue. And then again, home value is about $400,000. 10% of the purchase price would be like $40,000, and then the home buyer would be responsible for a minimum of $4,000. So we just provided an example for you how that would work. We got some of these changes from CEE as they work with buyers and working on different issues that they're coming up with. So we do this every year with them. We go through the guidelines and try to figure out whether or not there are adjustments. We hate to adjust it too much because, you're dealing with a set of loan applicants in one year and then you're changing the requirements in the next year. So we don't like to do it a lot, but I think these were definitely issues that they were faced with that we needed to approve. No changes are proposed for the rehab program, and with that, Mayor, we are recommending approval of that authorization. So any questions you may have, I'll take those at this time.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wishnak. Council, any questions for Ms. Wishnak? Or any comments? Or a motion? Councilmember Wilburn?
As soon as they pop up the recommendation.
Where'd that go?
There we go. I move that we adopt the resolutions to approve the authorization of $300,000 from the existing balance in the HRA levy fund to the Welcome to Minnetonka and Minnetonka Home Enhancement programs.
Is there a second? Councilmember Shack?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll second.
All right. And does anyone have any comments I want to make? We kind of rushed to that quickly. So we've got a motion by Councilmember Wilbur and a second by Councilmember Shack. I'm just going to quickly comment. I was impressed with the staff report and the simplification of the programs, and I think those are big improvements. So just want to go on the record saying that. Ms. Larson, would you please call roll?
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack,
Yes.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Rameli,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Weersum.
Yes, motion carries. Item 14C is items concerning His House Foundation services. And Ms. Wishnak, you are still up.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This is the contract for His House, which is our homelessness prevention and provider when folks are entering homelessness. In July of 2022, the City Council approved a contract with His House Foundation, and at that time it was a 2-year pilot program that you establish. And since then they've helped 24 households, and really what the money goes toward is financial assistance to do casework. They do temporary housing, which is, as you know, in a hotel typically in the area, so that people still can get to work and to school and all of the things that they're used to doing. And then sometimes it's first month rent deposits on new housing for the person they're helping. The stats on actual residents, there's 59 Minnetonka residents, and 34 of those are minors. Approximately 68,000 or almost 70,000 has been used. Roughly 131,000 remains. So when considering this extension, this additional 2-year agreement with His House, we're not asking for any more money for that program. The money is sitting there. We just need to re-up the contract. Just so you know, there hasn't been any interruption in service since July. They know that we were working on the contract and getting it on your agenda. So they've been very easy to work with on that front and continue to provide services to people. The only other thing that I want to mention here is ICA did previously administer the rental assistance program for the city, and this started during the pandemic. And so all of that money that was issued to that organization through the pandemic and post-pandemic has been utilized, so that money has run out. The city council originally approved an additional $50,000 in rental assistance through the HRA levy that has not been spent yet. We haven't placed it with an organization. We're proposing to place it with His House just because of some of the interactions that they have with people either that are housing insecure or they're dealing with some other kind of housing issue with the person they're dealing with, and it just seems a little bit closer. I think I answered this last time. I think Councilmember Calvert asked, people not go to ICA anymore? No, they still go to ICA. They still get their services. We always have been, our rent assistance has been the organization of last resort, so to speak. It's a safety net for when the county monies don't come through, or when the state money for rental assistance didn't come through. We've never been the primary place where people go to get rent assistance. It's just a safeguard in case they're not able to get it anywhere else. So I think we talked about that enough last time, but I just wanted to offer that again to the city. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the resolution for extension and of that contract with His House and the additional rental assistance. There's also an agreement with His House for that specific service. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Wishnak. Council, any questions for staff on this one? Anyway, Councilmember Coakley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question. I had asked City Manager about it earlier. I know that this is for temporary emergency assistance for making sure folks are not, I guess, left homeless or evicted out of their house, however you want to say it. But I had asked him about how many folks are actually have His House helped get into permanent housing. I know they do it through coordinated access, but do you have a number of folks that's been helped with permanent housing through the relationship with His House and coordinated access?
Ms. Wishnak.
Mayor and Councilmember Coakley, I think we covered this a little bit at our housing update, but we haven't been able to fully track where people end up. Sometimes you know where the person ends up, and they can anecdotally tell us that, you know, a person has been placed in housing and was successful in getting into coordinated entry. However, we don't have good stats on that. Sometimes people leave the program and the assistance, and you might never run across them again. There's no requirement for them to check back in with His House. And frankly, there's not a really good way to do that. I've shared that with His House. If there's any possibility of how to give you a sense of that, she's thinking about how to handle that question, but at this time we don't have any good numbers on where they end up in their final housing situation.
Okay, so how long do folks tend to stay in a hotel? Like, I mean, I work for Coordinated Access, so I know that there's a way to track how many folks got housing. His house should be able to say, this is how many folks got housing, because they get approved the application and they say, okay, here's an apartment for you. Now, they may turn it down and say they don't want the apartment, and so maybe they reject it. But there is a way to track how many folks actually move from a hotel into a home. And so I would like to see that more concrete information on how many folks are actually getting housing, because to me, this is like putting a Band-Aid on a situation if you can't get people into permanent housing. Like, to continue to put people into hotels for whatever reason, yes, it solves the emergency of them not being on the street or them not losing their place. But if we're putting people in hotels and they're standing there for long periods of time and we don't have any way of tracking that, to me, I just think it's a waste of money. And so I would prefer to see like how many people are actually getting into permanent housing.
Ms. Wishnak.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Coakley. I think I agree with you in terms of the coordinated entry and the tracking of that. That's very much available. The problem that you have in this program is that not everybody chooses to enter coordinated entry. I'll give you an example. There's somebody who is living out of their van, and they choose to live in their van, and a campsite was coordinated for them to live. They chose not to enter the coordinated entry, but there was an ability to help them at least with food and some clothing needs, and get them to at least a temporary site for them to stay. So that would be a case where they don't enter the coordinated entry, but there was an emergency assistance provided to that person. So that can happen where you don't enter the coordinated entry, and so you wouldn't have that data and you wouldn't know where that person ended up. So that case is still active, and that's somebody we're tracking and continuing to meet with and seeing if we can get to permanent housing. But at this point, that's not the wishes of the customer. So I think it sounds easy. It's not as easy when we're dealing with different situations.
Councilmember Romali.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. Is this, in your opinion, kind of partly because there are requirements in terms of shelter stay before you can, be considered for more permanent housing solutions, and so that some people, especially those with families, children, may be reluctant to enter the coordinated system? Is that kind of any part of the problem here? And so, or is that, are we, I understand and agree with Councilmember Coakley's concern about tracking this, but I also, given what you just said in the example that you just gave, is that, it occurred to me looking through the staff report, is that there were kind of requirements for both individuals and families to stay in a shelter before they could even be considered.
Right. And Mayor and Councilmember Romali, and in this situation, shelter is considered the hotel. That's why we did it the way we have been doing it, because what we didn't want to happen is people having to relocate themselves to a shelter, which is primarily in Minneapolis. That's the shelter system that people would typically enter. So that's why we did this program, so that they could avoid that. They meet the requirements for coordinated entry when they're in a hotel stay. So that's how we're getting through that process. However, I would say that just not everybody is in the state of mind that that's the next step. So there's maybe drug issues, maybe there's mental health issues, maybe there's a lot of different factors going on with the people that are being helped. Their immediate solution isn't, I'm going to go through the coordinated entry and we're going to get to an apartment. That's not always where people are at. So sometimes you have to be you know, the people that provide these services just have to be checking in constantly and trying to get them to the eventual goal, which is absolutely permanent housing. But that's not where everybody starts. So it takes a while and takes time.
Councilmember Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. So, you know, Martha Brannon is in Minnetonka Family Collaborative with me, which is a group of nonprofits run through Minnetonka Public Schools that supports children and families at risk for many different things, whether it's food insecurity, housing insecurity, job insecurity, you name it, grief counseling, tutoring, I mean, everything under the sun. It's such a wonderful group of people, and that's where I met Mary, and that's when I connected Mary with Ms. Wishnak and other people, because there was a family experiencing housing insecurity during the it was terribly hot and very smoky from the Canadian wildfires, and it just was unhealthy for them to be living basically, I think, behind a gas station. And so in talking to Martha, who is the head of his house and runs this program, the problem out here in the West Metro, as Ms. Wishnak was trying to explain, the problem with living in the West Metro is that if you wanted to get into these formal housing programs, especially for families that had children in schools here, their jobs might, you know, they might even have a job, it just, you know, they might have some like medical expense crisis or something. They would have to go downtown, pull the kids out of school, be downtown and live in a shelter downtown to even get into the program. And so the whole point of this pilot with his house was to create conditions where individuals and families could stay out here where they live and not have to relocate several times just to get into a housing program and still access those permanent housing programs. And so that is literally the reason that we were doing this. So in my opinion, while I completely understand the concern around, you know, the tracking and, you know, trying to get people into permanent housing, I completely respectfully disagree that it's a waste of money, because when you're experiencing a housing crisis and you need a roof over your head, especially in Minnesota where we have real weather, this isn't Santa Barbara, you know, people need, and I have people in my life that experience all kinds of insecurities, and it's a struggle for family members sometimes to assist them. So I just, you know, I think, in my opinion, I think especially since we are the agency of last resort, there are other homelessness programs or housing insecurity programs through the county and the state. I think this is a great use of our money to keep a roof over people's heads. And I think Martha's done a great job spearheading this pilot and getting really fabulous results, because we have helped a lot of families out here and individuals.
Great. Any other comments? Councilmember Wilburn?
So just really quick, I also agree that this is a worthwhile program, and I'm in favor of extending it. I have had conversations with Commissioner Edelson about this county requirement of having to stay in shelter and the no shelters being, and just a brief conversation. I intend to have more conversations, because I think that's something that we need to get changed at the county level, so then maybe these funds can go to something else to help people in need. And just my other comment is, I know at a study session, it was decided that we wanted to have a written policy but not as, so I would like to, at some future, maybe a future study session, like actually see the written policy for how this city deals with homelessness. I realize this is part of it, but like the whole, the whole plan. And then also, then it could be part of the report, like what happens if we spend all of the funds for his house and there's still people in need. So, but we don't have to do that tonight.
Mayor, though, I will
Yes.
just give you at least a time frame. So it was the encampment policy that we talked about at the study session in July. So we haven't quite gotten the full encampment policy completed. I'm sure that'll be in the next couple of months. We're scheduled. We do 2 housing updates to a year. So on one of those occasions, we'll go ahead and bring that back to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Coakley.
I did ask a question about how long do the folks stay in the hotel? I don't think that question was answered.
Ms. Wishnak.
I forgot to answer. Sorry, Mayor, and sorry, Councilmember Coakley. Typically, I hear anywhere from a week to a couple of weeks is a normal stay. So it can be up to 3 weeks. That's usually past 3 weeks. They try to find more permanent solutions. But I would say 1 to 3 weeks is a normal range of time before they're making another adjustment, wherever that may be.
Okay, so I don't know. It does prop a lot of questions for me because I live this life. Like, this is not something that staff can say to me, council members can say to me. This is something I've lived, my lived experience. And so I know how this works. I've worked in this area. I lived this experience. My son has lived this experience. I know how this works. And so I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep hammering it home because I worked at Emerge, and we poured a lot of money into clients and people, and sometimes they just couldn't get there. And I just want to be careful that, because it is a pilot program, it's a new program, and maybe folks just don't really get the programming, how this stuff really works. But I just want to make sure that we're just not pouring money into a program and folks are not ending up with housing, because it could become a cycle. These same folks coming back, using the money. Well, there's a policy that they can't use it again, but they don't get into permanent housing. The goal is always to get people into permanent housing if they choose to. Now, I know some folks choose not to. I did an intern at Simpson Housing. I know they do that because of mental health or whatever reason. But I just want to make sure that we're not just spending money or wasting money, as I call it, to do this and then people don't get into housing. So that's just what I'm trying to get at, making sure people are really getting into housing, and somehow we need to track it some type of way. There's a way you can track it.
Thank you, Councilmember Coakley. Anything else for anyone? Councilmember Oberon?
So I'm just, and maybe it would be helpful if and maybe not tonight, but if we knew like what the procedure, what happens after someone is placed in a hotel. Does his house still have communication with them, or are they, are they passed off to someone else? So, like, to Councilmember Coakley's point, like, why don't we know what's happening?
And I'll comment if I may, because I mean, I agree with what Councilmember Coakley says. Clearly we want to get people into permanent housing. That's the goal. But compared to larger cities, we don't have an enormous homeless problem, but we do have a homeless problem, and people do get evicted from apartments and from places to live in Minnetonka. And if you get evicted and you don't have a place to turn, you're homeless. So we have a homeless issue, and it's so complex. I mean, I was in 3 meetings last week or the week before, kind of mush this together, pardon me, And we talked about homelessness and or talked about housing and homelessness and all of those. And in every one, we talked about mental health and the challenges associated with the difficulty of getting people in safe, permanent housing. And the issue is complex, and no two circumstances are exactly the same. And so, I'm going to take a step back. I mean, I agree with most of what's been said tonight about the desirability of tracking, the importance of getting people into permanent housing. It's not a straight path, I don't think, for anyone. But the key is, I'm very pleased that we have this program to help homeless Minnetonka families, and I think it's an important program. I differ with Councilmember Coakley in that I don't want to spend too much money on temporary housing when the goal is permanent housing. On the other hand, I don't think we're wasting our money if we're taking somebody who would be on the street and putting them into temporary housing and safe temporary housing. So, I think I think that as we work on programs, we want to have programs that, cover as many people as possible, everybody, and we can solve the problem. If it was that simple, the problem might be solved. I think it's complex and every circumstance is different. And I'm pleased that we've got a program that recognizes, doesn't stick our head in the sand. It says, we're Minnetonka. We don't have a homelessness problem. That's not the way it is in our city. No, it is the way it is in our city. I'm glad that we're doing something about it. And I think we as a council can decide, are we doing enough? Is there more that we could be doing? But I think this program, I fully support the extension because I think it's really important for the residents of our community. And it makes everybody, without housing, people don't have a chance. And we like to believe that Minnetonka is a city where people have a chance. And we have to make sure that they have housing. So that's my little speech. I'm sorry, but if someone would like to make a motion, I'll take a motion. Councilmember Shack.
Thank you, Mayor. I will make the motion to approve the resolutions as it relates to his house, the contract, and the rental assistance program.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Calvert.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Shack and a second by Councilmember Calvert. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack,
Yes.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romalee,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Wearsum.
Yes, motion carries. We're getting there, folks, but we're not done yet. So item 14D is a closed meeting to discuss labor negotiation strategies pursuant to Minnesota Statutes Section 13D.03. So I am going to be looking for a motion to close the public meeting, pursuant to Minnesota State Statutes 13D.03, subchapter 1B, to consider strategy for labor negotiations for law enforcement labor services local 442 police officers. Is there a motion? Councilmember Wilburn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Coakley.
Make a second.
So we've got a motion by Councilmember Wilburn and a second by Councilmember Coakley. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack,
Yes.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romalee,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Wearsum.
Yes, motion carries. So I have to say this, the time and place of the closed meeting will be, and I will say, I'm going to give us 5 minutes, it will be 10:20 p.m. on October 7th, 2024, and we will convene in closed session at the Minnehaha room. And then I will inform you that at the conclusion of the closed meeting, no other regular no regular business of the city will be discussed, and the regular meeting will be adjourned. But don't think you're totally off the hook, because there will be an Economic Development Authority meeting, which we will convene here, and we will try to make that happen as quickly as possible. So with that, let's go to the Minnehaha room, and we've got 3 minutes to get there. Mike, we good? Are we ready to go? Okay, so item let's see, item 15 is appointments and reappointments. We have none. And item 16 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? In a second? Councilmember? Okay, we've got a motion by Councilmember Wilburn and a second by Councilmember O'Malley. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. And now we will turn around, and I will remind everyone that it is still Monday, October 7th, 2024. This is a meeting of the City of Minnetonka Economic Development Authority. I will call this meeting to order. And Ms. Larson, would you please call roll?
Wilburn,
Here.
Calvert,
Here.
Romalee,
Here.
Coakley,
Here.
Foster Bolton,
Here.
Shack.
Here.
Here.
Oh, Wearsome.
Okay, here. I am here. It's okay. It's
What's
okay.
his name over there?
I'm not sensitive. I messed up your name earlier. Okay, we're good. Okay, next item after roll call is approval of the agenda. And Ms. Wishnack, do you
No
want to
changes.
No changes. So we need a motion, Commissioner Calvert,
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the agenda.
Commissioner Wilburn.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Commissioner Calvert and a second by Commissioner Wilburn. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Wilburn,
Yes?
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romalee,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Foster Bolton.
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. Item 4 is approval of minutes, and we have one set of minutes, the September 23, 2024 EDA minutes. Is there a motion? Commissioner Shack.
Thank you. I move approval of the minutes.
Is there a second? Commissioner Foster Bolton.
I second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Shack and a second by Commissioner Foster Bolton. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romalee,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is business items, and it should be familiar. It is 5A is Minnetonka Housing Loan Programs. Ms. Wishnack.
Thank you, President and Commissioners. This is the same report as you had before at your City Council meeting. I think just to explain why the EDA has to also approve is because you're using HRA levy funds to do these programs. So that's why you have a double duty of City Council and EDA approval. With that, I'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wishnack. Council, any questions on the things that we've already approved? All right, with that, then, is there a motion? Commissioner Wilburn.
I move that we adopt the resolutions pertaining to the Minnetonka Housing Loan Programs.
And is there a second? Commissioner Calvert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second.
All right, we've got a motion by Commissioner Wilburn and a second by Commissioner Calvert. Ms. Larson, please call roll.
Wilburn,
Yes.
Calvert,
Yes.
Romalee,
Yes.
Coakley,
Yes.
Foster Bolton,
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Wearsome.
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is adjournment. Is there a motion? Commissioner Wilburn.
I move adjournment.
Is there a second? Commissioner Calvert.
I second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Wilburn and a second by Commissioner Calvert. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. We did it.